Hello, everyone, and thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney in London in the UploadVR studios as we talk about the next steps in personal computing. We're wearing Quest 3 headsets today with last generation meta avatars. We're using hand tracking, built-in microphones. I've actually got a wired connection today. My Wi-Fi is off. We've got tablets in front of us that show us notes and comments so we can interact with our audience when we're live. Thank you to our patrons for supporting the work we do over on UploadVR.com. In case this is your first time, you can become a paying member on UploadVR.com to support our work directly. We thank our patrons by name here on this podcast and listed on our website. That includes XR Developer News, Podum, the developer of Smash Drums out there, Holonet, Justin Corcoran at Phosphor Studios, Richard Meller, Parmesan Cubit, Steve Lucas, David Wyatt, and DePonch, and Soul Presence. Sincerely, all of you, thank you for your support, and a special call out this week to Justin Corcoran, in particular out there, who just relaunched the Brookhaven experiment in standalone VR. That's a big moment for a developer who has been here for VR's full consumer journey and a member of this community supporting us. So thank you, Justin, for your support. Go check that out on your Quest headset of choice. I also note that I got my start today here in New York by becoming a Ninja Turtle. That was amazing. And some of you were over on our latest tour of Walkabout Mini Golf the moment that it opened its doors to Forgotten Fairyland. That's a new abandoned amusement park. So hello to anyone that was over there watching us now over here on VR Download. Please feel free to share where you're watching us from, and hello to our time travelers catching us at different times or speeds, as well as those of us watching us through a universal translator of some kind into their native language. David, what do we have today?
Hello, everyone. So we have a lot of big topics today that we're going to build to at the end of the show. Before then, we're going to start by talking about an interesting VRChat world creation that Ian found, where people are using Quest Pro's eye tracking to guide the head of a bird avatar. So it's a really interesting approach there to use eye tracking in kind of an innovative way. Then we'll have a meta section where we discuss some meta topics. Firstly, their previously mobile and web only Horizon World shooter getting VR support after an uproar. Meta revealing the first technical details of its Horizon engine, which it built, it says, from scratch to replace the Unity runtime of Horizon Worlds. We will then discuss the release of Blumhouse Enhanced Cinema. It's out today on Quest 3 and 3S in the US, and it lets you, for $5, rent either Megan or the Black Phone and watch them in custom VR environments with immersive special effects that kind of spill out of the screen. So that's a very interesting and big launch for Quest. We will finish up our meta section by talking about Meta AI, specifically that Meta is now feeding your Meta AI interactions into its targeted advertising model from December. That will be in effect. We will then go on to discuss Apple Vision Pro, the Samsung headset, and Valve's next headset. So despite what some media outlets would have you believe, that there's some sort of cooling off that's occurred since Apple Vision Pro, in their view, their false view, failed. Instead, what we expect, according to all the rumors and reports that we're following clearly, is that this year we could see 3 massive headsets launching: a new Apple Vision Pro with an M4 or M5 chip and a new strap, a Samsung Galaxy XR headset that, as we will discuss, seems like it will come with controllers in the box, and a new headset from Valve. So quite the opposite of VR headset cool-off. We're expecting, based on these rumors, that you're going to have more headsets that you can afford or have time to use, on the high end at least. But we're not, as far as we're aware, expecting anything on the kind of Quest 3, 3S low end and mid range there, based on the reports we've seen so far.
I like Siegfried's comment out there, commenting Brookhaven. Wow, I played that a lot in 2016. Yes, it comes from an entire generation. That game was kind of the go-to horror experience you would give someone if they had a headset in 2016, 2017. Beat Saber didn't exist yet. Some of our favorites that we all know that are go-tos for those first timers didn't exist yet. And Brookhaven, if you had a friend who wasn't scared of a horror movie, this was the experience you kind of turned to and got them into it real quick. So that's on.
Yeah. I was just going to say it was the HTC Vive's one of its best launch window titles. It came out just a few months after the original Vive. It really took advantage of those track controllers. This was before Arizona Sunshine, before The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners. This was kind of like the OG consumer PC VR zombie wave shooter. And as Ian says, it's now available on Quest headsets.
Yep. We ready to talk about that first subject today? And hello to everyone in our comments. We'll keep going through those. We do have Phosphor out there, the developers of that game. I'm seeing Geek Godin out there and Arlen, a lot of regular viewers up above, Denver and F Meister. Thank you all for tuning in. Yeah, we're gonna cover everything. Yeah, I want to talk about the bird, but is there anything in comments you want to talk about first?
No, I think we can get straight in. This was an interesting one that you picked up on, a really sort of non-obvious but fascinating usage of eye tracking in social VR. Why don't you tell us all about it?
Yeah, I don't know if we can get the video running in here right now, but it's a really cool depiction of it, and it's such an eye opener. So this is, I think, Perpsy is the name of the creator. They took a model inspiration from an owl that was out there in VRChat, and then they added to this griffin model from another creator, and using their own sort of fork of this griffin avatar, they hooked up eye tracking, their Quest Pro eye tracking, to the head movements of the bird. And now your controllers can control specific aspects of the bird's body as it moves around. But specifically, they're now letting the head movements of the bird move around just like this, wherever your eye movements are moving. And it mimics the head movements that a bird does, because it seems to look very much like that when it's looking around. So there are a lot of bird avian people in VRChat that are very excited about this. Discovered it on Blue Sky and chatted with the creator a little bit about this invention, so to speak. You know, it's not anyone's in particular one creation. There's a lot of different people contributing to this. But Perpsy is out there showing it off, and it went a little bit viral on Blue Sky, which was kind of interesting to see. But really neat. And if you see any cool hacks that people are doing with avatars, it's really neat. I remember, I don't know, it was a decade ago almost now, I saw people doing puppet shows in VRChat with the Vive controllers back in the day. And that's a neat way of hacking the system. And even today, it's still amazing to see new things being done.
Yeah, I really like the art style here as well. A lot of these creators are learning how to work within a system where often your users are going to be running at a relatively low render resolution. So there are certain art styles that kind of don't degrade visually as much with aliasing. And this is one of those examples where it kind of just fits very well with current VR render resolutions.
I'm looking at Shala Shaska's comment out there, because we can't show the video. I think
if you click on that link in the comments, you'll be able to see the video.
Try to look at the video, and I'm going to try to mimic for you, pantomime the what's happening, because they're saying a face tracking avatar. There's thousands upon thousands of those, yes, but they're attaching them to the movements of the head of the bird, such that I'm going to try to mimic this. And it's those are bird-like movements, but they're actually the movements of an eyeball moving around inside of a head. And making that switch is, you were wonderful at pointing out how if you go watch movies like Lord of the Rings or Planet of the Apes, where you have motion captured characters doing lots of actions, the people try to move like the characters in order for the skeletons and for the works of special effects artists to be easier. Well, this actually works in the reverse, where you actually get to role play as the character a little bit easier just by letting your eyes do your work for you. And it's a really neat idea.
Yeah, it's like a very extreme take on the idea of retargeting, where, you know, in VR, you could use body and face tracking to drive an avatar that is directly proportional to your own proportions, but you can also retarget your motions to something that has a very different kind of physical layout. And so this is a real extreme example of not just kind of having a different length limb or something, but actually changing the entire way that you map one body tracking aspect into an avatar. Here, you know, eye tracking to head movement, which is more like birds. Let's move on to the next topic. I think because this is very interesting stuff going on in VRChat, and we love to just highlight some of it from time to time. But I think we really want to get into some of those later topics. So let's just go straight into this meta section. So Superstrike. Last month, we reported on how Meta's first-party studio, Uro Interactive, which it set up a few years ago to build high-quality Horizon Worlds games, had just released last month in open beta a Horizon World shooter that was only available on flat screen, mobile, and web, so not in VR. So that's Meta Reality Labs releasing a shooter that is not available in VR, which is unthinkable a few years ago. There was a huge community uproar here, even from the people who are fans of VR Horizon Worlds, of why is this new project not available on headsets? Why is this mobile and web only? We discussed kind of at the time why that's the case. Meta's trying to diversify Reality Labs and Horizon Worlds in general to be a flat screen competitor to Roblox and Fortnite and those kind of experiences, as well as being a VR social platform. But there was just such an uproar from the community here. Every comment I saw on their Discord, on their Instagram channels, on their Facebook around this was just bring it to VR, bring it to VR. And now they've brought it to VR. So they have experimental support. And we just want to note that because it's an example of how, Meta sometimes will reverse decisions or reprioritize things based on community outrage. A good example I can think of is around 2 years ago when they removed Google Cast from Quest. It lasted, I think, less than 2 weeks, something like 10 to 14 days, because all the Meta community forums were just people saying, bring back Google Cast. I need it. My family's over for Christmas. I'm trying to cast my Quest to the TV. Why on earth would you remove this? And within 14 days, they brought it back. So this is another example of how this is a company that will make some very, very questionable decisions at times, but also seems like it will react. But I want to also just note that, of course, a lot of people don't care either way, whether it's in VR or flat screen. They're not going to want to play a game in Horizon Worlds. But yeah, I think this is just notable regardless.
I'm looking at the comments here where one person is like, stop talking about VRChat. One person's wanting us to talk about VRChat more. And Jack B's comment out there talking about masquerading as different things in VR. I feel like the opening shot of Ready Player One described this perfectly. And I'm not talking about when he goes into VR. I'm talking about while we watch the stack of trailers and we see each person inside of their headset going down each trailer, and we see each person using VR exactly as we're all describing here in the comments. Yeah, and I haven't played this.
I tried it out on mobile just briefly when it was mobile only, just to see, what on earth is this when I was reporting on it. So the irony for me is that I think Horizon Worlds is getting better and better as a VR platform. It was, terrible when it launched. The year after, it was bad. Then it was, mediocre. Now I think it's actually pretty okay to good. But it's not a good mobile platform because for VR, they actually render it natively on your headset. Whereas for mobile and web, Horizon Worlds is delivered through cloud streaming. There is no actual mobile client for Horizon Worlds. When you launch into one from the Meta Horizon app, you are cloud streaming from Meta servers. And weirdly for me, right, their Horizon Hyperscape VR cloud streaming based on Project Avalanche works great. I go into my Quest, I bring up Horizon Hyperscape, and it feels low latency, high quality. But then I go to my phone or my laptop and load up Horizon Worlds. And my understanding is that it is using actually a completely different cloud streaming tech stack, which is classic big tech company, of course, to have these things be completely unrelated tech stacks. But it's terrible for me. So I find it's stuttery, it's high latency. In general, it just sucks. So Horizon Worlds on mobile sucks, in my opinion. Maybe this is a UK thing. Maybe they just haven't deployed enough UK servers. And, I'm just outside London. So theoretically, if they do have any kind of UK presence, this should be fine for me. But it isn't. So I guess that kind of brings me to talking about what this doesn't use. And that's the new Horizon engine. So as we talked about at Connect, Meta announced its new Horizon engine and its new Horizon Studio to build for Horizon engine. And we're going to talk about it next. I think we can actually just bridge pretty well onto the next topic with this. This does not use Horizon Engine, which is weird, right? Normally a company comes out with a new engine and they put out a first-party example. So they announce a new engine, they put out a first-party game, Super Strike, but no, it's actually using Unity, the old Unity runtime for Horizon Worlds. So let's kind of just get into that next story then, I guess, unless there's anything you do want to add on Super Strike.
What I was going to say is I was just going to bring up the idea of optimizing your server architecture for lots of people in an instance versus some other aspect of the multiplayer experience, namely, bullets colliding with the heads of your enemies as you're shooting at them in a high-paced battle. Like, how far you are from the server can determine how great your bullets strike, depending on the type of architecture of your network. And that's I don't know. I wonder whether Horizon is going to work for those types of experience over the long haul. Yeah, I'm ready to move on and talk about the next thing. I'm loving the comments. Everyone is trying to get us to talk about Steam Frame and the idea that Valve is out there just watching our shows and watching all the funny memes that are coming out of all the subreddits as we all take copious amounts of copium. So we are taking. I see everyone taking the copium out there. We don't take the copium here very much. We wait, and but we'll cover some of that, I guess. David, what's the next one on our lineup here? You're muted over there. I guess I'll wait for you to come back. Let me look over in the comments.
Yeah, I'm back here now. So just had to deal with a slight minor tech issue there. So when it comes to the actual server-side networking of Horizon Worlds, that's something that they are really focusing on with this new Horizon Engine, which brings us on to our next topic. I just said Super Strike doesn't use Horizon Engine. Meta announced Horizon Engine at Connect. It's currently only available in Immersive Home in V81 PTC of Quest's Horizon OS. So if you're on the public test channel of Horizon OS, that new overhauled home environment is a Horizon world using Horizon Engine. The other thing that is using Horizon Engine is the new Horizon Central. So if you are familiar with Horizon Worlds, you'll know Horizon Central is like the default not home world, the default sort of community hub world, the town center, essentially, the town square. And if you see a new Horizon Central that is very different than the old one, that is Horizon Engine. So right now, as far as we're aware, only those two experiences are using it. There may also be a build of Horizon Arena, this new world that you can watch concerts and things, and they're using it. But in general, this isn't something that is widely available for creators yet. They're still taking in applications for early access. And so Horizon Engine is, according to Meta, a from-scratch new engine designed to replace the Unity runtime of Horizon Worlds so that they can achieve much lower loading times. They say 4 times faster loading, as well as better graphics and more people in the same instance. So with the Unity runtime, I think 32 or something is the maximum, whereas with Horizon Engine, they say they can do 100 or more avatars within the same instance. But one thing we didn't really hear at all from Meta was any technical details. What is Horizon Engine? Some people were even questioning, like, is this a new engine or is it just a marketing term for, some sort of like enhanced subsystem within Unity that Meta built? Well, according to Meta, this is an entirely new from scratch engine. They're talking about how in their research, one of the things that they figured out was that if the loading time for a world is over 7 seconds, that's the threshold at which people give up or don't come back. And if you can deliver a loading time from one world to another of less than 7 seconds, such that it feels more like going from one web page to another on the web than it does, waiting for an entirely new game scene to load on an old console using a hard drive, as an example, then according to Meta, their research tells them retention can go way up. So that actually was, according to Meta, their real onus for doing this, their reason. They realized that with the traditional Unity runtime, there was no way they could deliver this. So they invested a significant amount of engineering time and money and effort into developing an engine specifically for Horizon Worlds. And this isn't, unheard of, right? Roblox has its own engine, Minecraft has its own engine. At some point, engines like Unity, we're using it right now, they're amazing for general purpose development. They make building games easier than ever. But if you want to do something truly ambitious and different, like build a connected metaverse that feels like it takes a couple of seconds to go from entirely new worlds to the other and have 100+ users in the same instance, all running on a mobile chipset, then you need to go custom. And the irony is that we were telling them to do this years and years ago. I think one of the first things I said about Horizon Worlds when it was called Facebook Horizon was, I don't understand why they're going to just try and shoehorn this into Unity. That's not going to work. I'm not the only person who said that. I think John Carmack was pointing out a long time ago some of these limitations of these higher level engines. But the news, I guess, is that they finally revealed some of the specific technical details of what is going on behind the scene. So according to Meta, Horizon Engine automatically scales from high-end cloud rendering to running on mobile phones, supports expansive environments that are streamed as sub-levels with automatic management of object quality through automatically generated LODs, so level of details, those things you see in a video game where they load in lower detail versions of assets the further away you are. They're saying a core feature of Horizon Engine is doing kind of substreaming of areas and LODs automatically. They say that on the asset side, they have a robust, data-driven, and creator-controlled asset pipeline with modern workflows like popcorn effects for effects, Fmod for sound, PhysX from NVIDIA for physics, a spatialized audio system that stitches together immersive sound, immersive media formats, and mixes the voice chat on the server side so it can deliver you a specific, custom, personalized spatial audio mix that brings in dozens of avatars at once instead of having you do all that on the client side, which is just not going to be practical on a mobile chipset. That's a really clever solution, I think. It's something that is, again, I think we talked about this years ago as being needed to deliver a metaverse style experience. They also say that they have first-class networking that allows for low latency player predicted interactions with server validation and creator defined network components. Some of this is quite detailed, but we might as well just say it because it's all they've said so far. They say it's a mobile and VR first forward renderer with a physically based shading model, built-in light baker, probe defined lighting for dynamic objects, and material framework with a stackable surface shader system. If you're a developer, you'll know what this is. If not, don't worry, we'll be done in a few seconds. It also says that it has a multi-threaded task scheduling and streaming system that maintains quality and balances performance while staying at the frame rate needed by Quest and other systems. On the scripting side, just like on the old Horizon desktop editor, you use TypeScript for logic and control flow with a entity lifecycle. And something that a lot of developers will be used to on the simulation side, it is a data-oriented ECS, entity component system, simulation system, which according to Meta can simulate, and here's the kicker, millions of networked entities. So if you want to get that, again, you can go on to uploadvr.com and read our article about that. We expect Meta to reveal even more specifics once this actually gets released to creators in early access, which is expected to happen late this year or early next year.
Yeah, so Guy Godin, the creator of Virtual Desktop out there, sort of teasing us about covering Horizon World, while Siegfried right after there is kind of asking the question that is in the back of my mind. Do you all think Horizon Worlds will still be around by 2030? We can't predict the future, right? So you're asking us straight up to guess and predict the future there, and it's not sort of the way it works. Right now, I still feel it's struggling as a platform. I felt it's struggling as a platform for 5 years now, and these tools are meant to change that, as every tool that Meta ever believes it releases into the public is supposed to change that. The question is, we've got people like Guy Godin, the creator of Virtual Desktop, who hand codes his logic that creates the premier software for connecting PCs to standalone VR today. hand codes it directly into a system, doesn't need anyone to help him do that. That's the opposite end of what these tools are meant to do and engage. But it's really hard for someone anywhere on the spectrum to look at this and go, why is this any more successful, or why would this succeed in any way, shape, or form that all of the previous 7 attempts didn't succeed at?
Yeah, so I think this is a pretty fundamentally big change compared to anything before. I think the biggest change we ever saw for Horizon Worlds until now was the move from an in VR creation system, and this was only around a year ago, right? We're still talking very narrow time scales in terms of this rolling out to all creators, to a desktop editor. In fact, in terms of this rolling out widely, it has been 8 months only since they moved from this system where most worlds were being made for the most of Horizon Worlds time by people literally placing primitive 3D shapes in VR in a Quest 2 and then using a visual scripting system where they're connecting, in 6.VR logic systems together as giant visual scripting systems in VR. And that all sounds amazing in theory, right? And it's like, wow, anyone can make a world in VR. But it was terrible because all of these worlds were just, okay, the vast majority of these worlds were just cartoony, simple shapes that you would ridicule if you looked at from a flat screen screenshot, and even many times in VR. And it didn't allow for advanced functionality. It didn't allow for realistic graphics. Meta realized it was a terrible idea, and only 8 months ago rolled out the Horizon desktop editor and deprecated the NVR tools. So that big, massive fundamental change is only 8 months old. Okay. Now this is even bigger. This is a much bigger change. People talking about, why would this be different? They've literally spent years building a completely new game engine for this. So the answer to being asked, do I think it'll be around in 2030 is I have no idea, but I probably yes, because this does seem, if you look at this over the scale of decades, to be only the beginning. If we do imagine a scenario, a future in which Horizon Worlds is successful in the late 2030s, for example, it will be quaint to say, do you remember back when Horizon Worlds were built in VR and used Unity as the engine? But that's all we've seen so far until 8 months ago, and even today we don't even have this Horizon engine yet. So I think wait and see is my answer to this question. What's very clear is that this is not a short-term aspiration for Meta. They do have very, very long-term ambitions here. Some of the people that have been asking, where is the billions of dollars spent on Horizon Worlds going? Well, this is one of the answers, building a completely new game engine to support 100 plus players in the same instances and sub 7-second loading times for entire virtual worlds. So I think, as we've said many times on this show, the fundamental idea of a metaverse platform where you can go to a completely new virtual reality experience without having to go, back to a home screen in an app store and wait for gigabytes of data to download and install, and every single app is its own siloed island where you start it up, you tell it, oh yeah, I want to do stick turning and I want to have my comfort vignette this way, and yeah, turn on subtitles, my language is English, accept the end user license agreement, and 10 minutes later you're in an experience. That cannot be the future of VR, right? There are many, many experiences that will always be like that and should be. But in terms of how the fundamental idea of a metaverse that lets you jump from one world to the other and have consistent interactions, the same avatar, the same equipment, it's good. But Meta's implementation of that idea so far has been pretty terrible. So I think we have quite a balanced view on this show. I would say Horizon Worlds does not get any award for being best VR app, but I think it does go into the category of most improved. And most improved can mean you started at terrible and got to bad. That doesn't mean it's a great app. But I'm saying if you look at the rate of change here, if you look at where this was 2 years ago and where it is today, it's not even comparable. If your view of Horizon Worlds is based on trying it 2 years ago, it's a ship of Theseus situation. You tried a different app. I would recommend, wait 6 months until there are widespread, this is presumably, I don't know the timeline, 6 months or however long it takes until there are widespread Horizon Engine titles where you're seeing Horizon Engine graphics, Horizon Engine loading times, and some of the refinements around that, and then go in and give your impression. Because what's the point of us having an opinion on the Unity version of Horizon Worlds that is literally in the middle of being replaced, and that's what this is about. But again, I want to be clear. Yes, everything people are saying about where Horizon Worlds has been in the past few years is completely valid and true.
Ooh, all right, there's a lot you talked for a while there, so I should get some space here to respond to
Go
some of
for it.
that. So there, the tour that we just premiered on our channel for the latest creation out of Walkabout Mini Golf, Forgotten Fairyland, that was given to us by Don Carson, who's a former Imagineer who has designed amusement park rides in the real world. And that's what they did today was they released their amusement park rides. And um, you can go read our article on it. Maybe we should put it in the link so that it gets out there in this particular VR download, since I'm going to take some space to talk about this. But in that article, we actually have the first depiction of the walkabout path. And what the walkabout path is an artist like Don Carson and maybe a couple others going into virtual reality, Gravity Sketch, and charting out with a orange box, I think it's orange color, the path that they're going to have players follow from hole 1 to 18. Now, not all players are going to follow that path. Some are going to teleport to hole to hole to hole to hole. They'll never ever actually discover that there is a defined path that the developers invented that they imagine players following all the way through these holes, a walking path that you could go through this entire experience. Um, it turns out that Don Carson, the creator of this world, the person who did this walkabout path a while back, and now a year later has released a course along with all of the other artists on their team, adding in rotation. He built Horizon Worlds back in the day. His actual COVID escape, as I understand it, was building Horizon World. And I know this because I visited a couple of them on my mobile phone using the latest tools that Meta has rolled out. So a couple of the worlds that he made back before he started working in Walkabout Mini Golf are still findable and still workable on a mobile phone. And one of these was just exploring an emotion. I think it was grief that I visited. Was the emotion that was being explored by this space. And I pop into it on my mobile phone, and I'm walking my character around a little bit, my little third-person avatar that looks a little bit like this. And the sound and the colors and space of other objects being presented in this space made me take a deep breath. I go, and I'm just sitting there on my mobile phone, looking at a world that was made half a decade ago by a person who's building different virtual worlds today with entirely different virtual tools. And there's a chance that that world can go offline at any time because it was built with the original shape building tools that they had for this system that you're stacking together like we had just discussed, that have been tossed out the window. But here you had a world that I had visited here today, and I feel okay talking about this because that's exactly what happened. I visited it through this little window on my mobile phone, and it had an emotional effect on me in a slight little way, and then I swiped it away on my phone, and I got along with my day to other things, right? I wouldn't probably go visit that in VR for very long, but it worked as the intention of the space of evoking feeling. And what I just described to you was a whole 5-year journey of a dev who, on our website, we have the latest work. And I just explained to you that they were exploring what Meta was doing a half a decade ago with interest. And now they're no longer interacting with those tools, as I understand. They're interacting with different tools. I just showed you the tools that they're interacting with. They're using Gravity Sketch to build the world, the foundations of the world that everyone else on their team goes and layers on cool stuff upon. It's I needed to tell that story, I guess. Is just I needed to share that. Is there any interesting comments we should get into before we move on?
Yeah, a lot of people giving their opinions here. It's all over the board, and that's great to see that. I wouldn't like if everyone just had the same opinion, because then we wouldn't be having an interesting discussion. We have Marcellus saying that they've heard that all these changes have made some long-time Horizon Worlds creators complain about how much change they've had to keep up with. The platform fundamentally changing under their feet every 6 months to a year. That can't be easy for creators. Sao Galaxy and Andrew Tech kind of backing up what I'm saying, that the worlds that are built in the PC tool, the Horizon desktop editor, look dramatically better than the old in VR shape creation worlds. Immersed Robot saying, plenty of people dream of a true metaverse style experience like in Ready Player One. I think Meta are eventually aiming for a more clinical version of that. It's simply not possible right now. Yeah, we always need to point out that Ready Player One was set in 2045. So let's see where Horizon Worlds is in 20 years. I don't think it would be too crazy to say that it would be something on the scale, assuming Meta keeps up with it, that it would be something on the scale of Ready Player One, as I'm sure many other companies will make. This idea that we're talking about, this fundamental idea, it's the idea of VRChat as well, right? It's a very different approach to the same thing, but fundamentally it's the same idea that you go to a world not by going onto an app store and downloading a big file and waiting for it to install, but by simply clicking join world, go to world. And that's, the idea is good, and it's going to be interesting to see. Sao Galaxy VR pointing out, to people that are saying, I tried it 2 weeks ago, that as I was pointing out, nothing is running in the new engine yet. Yeah, this new engine is not available to developers yet. Meta is only just now talking about the first details. That's the story we're talking about here. So I want to have this discussion in 6 months' time, in 9 months' time, a year's time, and see how is making a new game
if
engine.
it survives that long.
I think it would. So that contention, I think that I would argue against. I don't like to predict the future, but the idea that Meta would build an entirely new game engine, launch it, presumably we're talking early 2026 for creators, and then 6 months later it's shut down the whole platform, that seems extremely unlikely to me. The 5-year thing, I would have that conversation, but I think that I would bet that this will be around in 2 years, 3 years for sure. 5 years less certain, 10 years, there's no point in predicting that time scale.
See, that gets me to much more philosophical things about the Facebook platform, right? People keep these accounts around not to, as namespace holders, not to use. And in many cases, that's what some of these Horizon worlds are. They're just that there's nothing of value lost. Except the worlds I just described. Like
Yeah.
I would miss some worlds, right? There are some places,
Of
but
course.
like it's not in comparison to the other stuff that are in other places. Like it is a minuscule amount of things that will be lost if that went away, compared to, gosh, what if Guy Godin deleted Virtual Desktop off of Steam tomorrow, right? Like there would be probably threats, right, made on people because of that. I don't know that the same thing would happen if all of Horizon Worlds just blinked away tomorrow.
There is, as with every platform like this, a strong, enthusiastic portion of consumers. There are interesting worlds, but like if you were to look at YouTube as a platform, obviously the recommendation algorithm is amazing. Google gets criticized for it, but you don't get enough credit to YouTube for the fact that there are billions of videos on there, and 99% of them are terrible, and you wouldn't want to watch them, and you would actually be frustrated by having to watch them. But the algorithm gives you the 1%, and this is still hundreds of millions of videos, right? The 1% of videos that you would find interesting. I think in any platform where users are uploading and creating content, you're going to have this problem that a lot of it is slop and a lot of it is nonsense, but there are some incredible worlds, right? There is a comedy club on Horizon Worlds that is brilliant, and they used to do it in Altspace and they moved to Horizon Worlds. There is a bar I always talk about where they have that clever solution of combining the arm span test and a human bouncer to make sure that no kids get in, so it keeps to an adult-only conversation. There are
I attended a variety show that was delightful. It was a whole variety show produced in Horizon Worlds. It was delightful. So
there's a lot of slop in VRChat too. There are amazing VRChat worlds, truly amazing ones, that it would be a terrible loss to the industry if VRChat disappeared tomorrow. But I would argue maybe the majority of VRChat worlds are slop, just like the majority of Rec Room worlds are slop. And Rec Room recently had to kind of pull back from their idea of everyone's a creator, because in their statement where they talked about laying off a third of staff, they said that, this idea of just giving everyone in VR creation tools for Rec Room didn't work either, because again, the majority is slop. But this is a lot of content markets are like this. Most ebooks are terrible slop, but 1% of ebooks are so amazing that they'll change your life. This is quite common. Most movies are not great these days. The controversial opinion, most movies suck these days, but a few of them are amazing and will make you, wish you watched them sooner. That's kind of the situation here. So the difficulty, of course, is how do you present to people the best worlds on these platforms while getting rid of recommending the slop, while also letting smaller creators be brought up to a wider audience. That's an impossible problem in some ways, and that is the big challenge of these recommendation systems. But I just want to point out that, like, on most platforms in all digital content and beyond, it's a high ratio of slop to gems anyway.
So Andrew out there is coming up with a question that's basically answered by another show we have called VR Sideload. And I don't know, you're going to get me philosophical here, but I'm going to argue that sideloading won the race for VR because it lets you adapt old worlds that you imagined you would visit when you were a kid into VR. And the only people that actually need to help you in doing that are the other people who are your peers out there in the world. They're the other fans who love the game and have adapted it for virtual reality. And in a very real, beautiful way, it's those people that are making VR as real as it is for us, right? So go watch our VR Sideload show. Don Hopper is out there trying to put that together. We have a very busy schedule with lots of places we need to go into VR and things we need to analyze and then come back out and write as quickly as we can to get in front of you. So we're trying to put that show together for VR Sideload where we're really making this clear. But, we reviewed Beyond Victory this week, the new Star Wars game, and you can read all of our careful words on it. And then you can go see Don out there flying in X-Wing Alliance from 1999 in his motion simulator, and his motion simulator is synced to the flight movements of his X-Wing. And it's just like he has fans to thank for that and $10 spent to Steam and nobody else, right? Like that's ultimately that's the beating heart of VR, and it's very, very far away from Horizon Worlds.
Yeah, for sure. So before we move on from this, I want to bring up a very interesting comment from Pearl Highcliffe, who said, hire curators, job creation. And I think this is a very interesting idea because the underlying assumption of everything I just said is that it has to be an algorithm that recommends the best worlds and apps and experiences. And big tech companies want this because it's a lot cheaper to do it with an algorithm and a lot more scalable, i.e. cheaper at scale, than to hire humans. But I think there are a few tech companies who curate with humans, and it's an infinitely better experience. Apple, for example, has to get credit on their App Store for having human creators pick out the best gems each week, whether it be on the Vision OS App Store or the iOS or Mac OS. That does make for a big difference. As far as I can tell, I don't see anything like that on Meta's store. Maybe they're A/B testing it and I just don't have it, but I don't see any editors' picks. I just see this is what our algorithm recommended you. And a lot of the time that is going to be slop because there's obviously a lot less signal there than on their bigger platforms like Instagram. So in some ways, this is our job in a wider sense, right? Henry Stockdale and Don Hopper are going out there and they're human creators going out to find you the best apps and games and worlds for VR. But it would be very interesting to see these companies do it themselves, because I think some of it is just about human taste. And I don't think any current algorithm is capable of telling you which Horizon World or VRChat world is, the gem versus the slop.
I mean, I'm I think about the categories at the top of our page a lot, David, and I think it should say places up there as one of the tabs. And you click on those places, you click on that tab, and then you're presented with a link to a place in VRChat. You're presented with a link to a place over on Steam. You're presented with sometimes it's just to a direct URL out there, right? And maybe there's a Horizon World somewhere in that list of places, but it's not in my mind of the top 25 or 50. If I was to do that right now, I don't see it in any of them. I don't see one of the Horizon Worlds in one of the top 50 places.
The only one that I would disagree with you about is that comedy club, the Soapstone Comedy Club, where I think if you are interested in comedy, it's great. There are equivalents in VRChat though, so you can kind of argue on whether that's the way you would want to attend that. Um, let's see where this is in a year, but broadly I agree with you. Do we want to move on to our next topic anyway? I think we could talk about this forever, but
We could, and it's obviously super engaging for our audience. And yeah, I
yeah,
appreciate David moving us on. Let's talk about Blumhouse. While you're just talking about Blumhouse, I'm going to switch to a wireless connection here because I have run out my battery by giving us. I wanted to see. Yeah, I'm at 7%
100%.
from 100%, and it was all because I'm using Ethernet. I wanted to see if I could feel a latency difference here with you across the Atlantic. But now I'll go to
It comes
wireless.
back to our constant fight of wired versus wireless, the real VR download drinking game. But
I
yeah,
know I didn't hook up my USB hub today, Ian, right? Like if I had a USB hub, we wouldn't be switching in the middle of our
you're
live
Mr.
show.
USB hub. What's going on?
It's over there in a bag. I got to go get it
It's
from
in your VR bag?
It's in one of my 3 VR bags. I don't know. All right.
Okay. So while Ian sorts out his hubs and his cables, I will wirelessly bring up the next topic, which is Blumhouse Enhanced Cinema is out now on Quest 3 and 3S. This was announced at MetaConnect 2025, and we talked about it, but now it is available. So what is this? Firstly, if you're outside the US, you don't get it. So this is US only. It is from the kind of Hollywood studio Blumhouse, which is essentially the company that has the monopoly on 21st century horror. Not a literal monopoly, but if I read out some of the movies and franchises that this company is behind, you'll realize what I mean by that. So they're behind Paranormal Activity, Insidious, Sinister, The Purge, Split, Get Out, Megan, and the cinema adaptation of Five Nights at Freddy's. So this is pretty inarguably, right, the leading 21st century horror movie studio. And they now have an app on Quest that lets you watch Megan and the Black Phone in a custom VR environment where immersive effects jump out from the screen and from the sides of the environment. So the business model here is the app is free, but you can't do anything other than rent one of these two movies for $5. You get it for 48 hours at most, where you can watch it up to 3 times. And while you're watching it, you get, explosions coming out of the screen, characters climbing on the walls, the environment dynamically changes in real time. It is a really unique take on what it means to watch a movie in VR. We talk about watching a movie in VR, and by default, that means, you put it up on a giant virtual cinema screen. Maybe it means for some platforms it's 3D. This is not, as far as I'm aware, 3D. It's still a 2D movie, but you're getting a VR immersive kind of environment. And there's somewhat of an analogy to be made to Apple Vision Pro, where you have, custom environments and apps like Disney Plus and HBO Max. So you have the, alien containment room in Disney Plus, or the Harry Potter Hogwarts Great Hall in HBO Max. But those are VR environments, but they don't adapt to the specific movie you're watching, right? They might have some background animations going on, but they're not aware of what you're watching. You can watch anything on either of these streaming platforms. On Blumhouse Enhanced Cinema, each environment of these two environments, it's custom made for the movie. It's time synced to what's going on in the movie. It is specifically for that movie. And so this is really, really fascinating. It's not a completely new idea. Don Hopper, who I think is in our comments, UploadVR's Don Hopper, looked at an app a few months ago called Relic, where they were testing this for very short clips from movies. But the difference here is that this is from the company. It's the full movie. And as far as we're aware, it's the first time where this has been done for a full movie legally and officially in VR. And presumably over time, they're going to want to bring more than just these two movies to this platform, or maybe they'll experiment and see, how many people watch this? What's the retention like? Do they sit through the whole movie? Are the headsets comfortable enough for, your average buyer to do that? Yeah, I think this is an interesting experiment, a big partnership for Meta, and I wish it was 3D. I wish it was outside the US, but even in these constraints, this is a big launch.
I'm really curious about when these things move from being gimmicks to being actual enhancements to the experience. If Megan or Chucky is actually in the room with you, right? And messing with you as you're watching the movie, that's a different thing. A scary face right by your head at the wrong time, that's going to mess with you in ways that you've never experienced watching a movie. So like, there's a easy, medium, hard, and extreme modes, right? Clicking what kind of an experience immersively you want when you go into the movie, of just how terrified you want to be by your surroundings, is entirely possible. I mean, eye tracking, right? There's just extraordinary things that can be done with this in the future. But
Oh, that's an
unless it's
interesting idea.
more than a gimmick, it's not going to be a very good test.
Well, I mean, why do you call it a gimmick, and where do you draw the line between gimmick? My understanding is that some of the examples of things that happen here is that in one of these movies, there's a big explosion, and so the entire room around you explodes. In one of these movies, glass is smashed, and in this, the glass smashes all over around your room. Some people will call that a gimmick. Other people will say that's really cool. I want to watch a movie like this. And when you talk about the scariness dial, that, to be clear, is not in this app, but is a very interesting idea. I think the idea here is, if you're not really, really comfortable with horror, don't do this, because this is probably designed to scare the S out of you. This is designed to be very scary. And I see already some people in our comments saying, absolutely not, no way, I'm not even installing this app. I'm not going near it, because they're not really fans of getting that scared.
I mean, like, all right, so let's imagine you're watching Midsummer, and it's the opening scene, and gas starts filling in your room, like the whole bottom layer of your movie theater fills with a little layer of cloud of gas. Thematically, it goes with the scene that's happening in the movie. I've just spoiled the opening scene of Midsummer a little bit for people out there. And you think of things like The Exorcist. I think they did an enhanced edition of The Exorcist back in the day, where they inserted like creepy devil faces in various portions of the movie that would just flash at you. That's what I'm hinting at would be really terrifying to pop out in the thing. But there's also things being done in physical theaters with The Matrix, with wraparound things,
Yeah,
effects that can come across other ways. This has been done for many, many years.
sure. 4D cinema, as they call it, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
smell-o-vision. I've done that. Whether I've gotten stabbed in the back during in a Disney theater by a bee, right? That's one of the effects, and I think A Bug's Life, but like a bug's, you get shrunk down, and all the bugs are around you, and you suddenly feel stung, right? Like that's an amazing effect. Well, it only works if the movie is really built for it, and the timing is selected really carefully, and you're not alone in many of these instances. So I saw a lot of people check out on the idea that this is just a solitary experience again,
Yeah,
and that is a real bummer.
that's a great point. I would love for this to be multiplayer, given that, this is the studio that owns this IP doing it. Theoretically, they should be able to make that happen. I That would be a great thing to hear, Connect 2026, Meta to come up on stage and say, and Blumhouse Enhanced Cinema is now multiplayer. You can have all these effects with your friends. I would love it. I doubt it will happen. But I think before we judge whether this is a gimmick, we need to try it. UploadVR's Don Hopper is in the comments saying that he does plan to try it tonight. And maybe if he gets time, we're all obviously very busy, maybe he could write up that experience and give a review. If you're in our comments and you're going to try this, please let us know what you think. We would love to know, did you find this to be an enhancement to the movie, a gimmick, pointless? Was it good? Was it bad? We're really, really curious. This only came out a few hours ago, so we obviously haven't had time to just throw away all our work and sit down and watch a full horror movie. So we aren't able to actually tell you what this is like yet.
Siegfried went immediately Hellraiser. Yeah, that's absolutely terrifying what you described. And yeah, if it was done well, it would be, used sparingly would be the interesting idea, right? You've got, think about how your mind gets blown in some movies when the director has just chosen to change the frame on you while the movie is rolling. So it starts off with like a 16:9 and suddenly it expands out and those black bars disappear. We're talking about the same sort of thing here for VR. It's just don't do it too much. Don't distract from the artistry on screen type thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, the fact that this is coming from the people who made the movie makes me optimistic that it isn't mistimed and that it is appropriate, but we'll have to try it out to find out. I think the concern for me is just how scalable is this? I imagine it probably took a long time to build these custom environments and effects for each movie. I see our comments pointing out the obvious potential solution here, which is AI. At some point, you could imagine uh, AI being able to do this at scale for movies so that you could have entire movie libraries. But then the less human touch you have here, the more you're going to have those problems. So I actually don't worry about this being mistimed or overused or inappropriate when it is handcrafted like these two movies. But I do worry that that might be the problem once this gets moved to AI in coming years, which I imagine it will.
I guess I got to throw out, go listen to our last podcast where we talked about the MotoGP racing 180-degree 3D video from Apple at the complete opposite spectrum of this for virtual reality, content produced exclusively for virtual reality with cameras and production value and thought put behind the placement of every camera and the presentation of each shot at wraparounds where you can look around at everything that you want. It's just a completely different type of media, and it's really delightful to see if you get a chance to go check it out. We ready to move on now?
Few comments I want to bring up before we move on. One is Sao Galaxy VR saying that the sound design will be 50% of this, and that is great of you to bring up because we forgot to mention that this does also include Dolby Atmos spatial audio. So you're getting the full kind of cinema scale spatial audio experience here when you're watching in Blumhouse Enhanced Cinema. Dolby Atmos, I think, was brought to Quest to make this possible. They've added support for that immersive sound format, the highest end immersive sound format for Quest to make this possible. So I actually am very keen to try that out. I probably will if I can find some sort of time, maybe on a flight that I may be taking next week. Perhaps I can bring my Quest and at some point watch this in with a VPN. Oh, of course not. On the internet connection wouldn't be good enough. Maybe in the hotel then at some point. Yeah, the other comment I want to point out is Farmer True VR, who's saying that they're a big fan of Blumhouse and so that they're looking forward to this. And Farmer True also says, even my wife, who doesn't use VR, is looking to try out the Blumhouse Enhanced Cinema. So there's a perspective of their wife is actually interested in this idea. And I can see that happening, right? There are a lot of people who are huge fans of Blumhouse. I read out When You're Away, all of their movies. They really are the horror movie company of the 21st century. And I think we could see some wider interest from outside the VR world on this.
Yeah, it's really fun to see the commenters sort of thinking about all the different ways, like the ring, that this could be used. You imagine the person crawling out of the screen. That's been people have messed around and made that already in just fan ways of imagining how that would work. The question is, how do you recreate that in a social setting where everyone in the theater is screaming with you? The one that hit me was, imagine the climax of the Infinity Saga, right? And imagine, the Avengers assembling, right? One final time, and suddenly there's thousands of them around you, and there were just a dozen of the Avengers right in front of you before. And imagine that is the moment when the frame expands, and suddenly you see thousands of fellow Avengers surrounding you, right? For that just one scene and the final battle. It is a new storytelling technique that is just beginning to be explored. So there's plenty of ways for meta and horror makers to start discovering exactly how to scare you just right. I wonder if, we're going to have to get in here and test this and do a hands-on as soon as we can.
Yeah, this is something I think Don may be able to find time, but we can't guarantee that, but we do want to. Let's move on to our final meta topic before we get in to the 3 high-end headsets that I talked about us talking about. Let's get into our final meta topic, which is that Meta AI data will, from December 16th, be fed into Meta's targeted advertising system so that it is used as part of how your ads are targeted towards you on Facebook and Instagram. So that includes using Meta AI on your Quest headset if you're in the US, and it includes using Meta AI, of course, on the Ray-Ban Meta, Oakley Meta, and Meta Ray-Ban display glasses, where you're going to be your primary interaction method with these devices often will be through Meta AI. So, to be clear, what this means is not that advertisers get access to your Meta AI interactions or conversations. That's not what this means. But what it does mean is that things you tell Meta AI, things you discuss, things you ask about, it will then, you could say, if you want to say it cynically, be used against you when you're on Facebook and Instagram to decide what is the ad that you're most likely to click on, that is most relevant to you in a positive sense, and then present that ad to you. The exception here, according to Meta, is any discussions you have with Meta AI about religious or political views, sexual orientation, health, racial or ethnic origin, philosophical beliefs, or trade union membership. So when I read that, I wondered, is there a clever workaround here where every time you talk to Meta AI, you say, as a strong trades unionman myself, here's my question for you. Or you start with, as Rene Descartes once said, for a philosophical belief, and then that conversation gets excluded from the data feeding system.
Yeah, it's like you're just inciting religious figures as like a tick, like a verbal tick, just to make sure that your question doesn't get recorded. And I like the idea that you can ask Meta AI these answers, but like, what if you indicated that your religious figure is also part of answering the question for you? Can you trick the system by addressing them both at the same time?
Yeah, I really wonder how they detect this. What kind of, it's obviously some sort of text classifier they're using here. But yeah, just to be very clear, this includes both text conversations you have on the app and voice conversations you have. For comparison, Google is not yet using Gemini data to target ads, but has not ruled it out in the future. So on like an industry analysis perspective, when you buy a Quest headset, our understanding is that these things are sold at cost or a loss somewhere in that area. So they're not making a profit on the Quest headset itself, but they do make recurring revenue from you buying games on the Quest store. Every time you buy a game on the Horizon store, Meta gets a 30% cut. So they're getting ongoing revenue from Quest headset owners. Also Horizon Plus, the Horizon Plus subscription service, they're getting that $8 a month if you're subscribing to that. Additionally, if you buy an official accessory for Meta, they're obviously horrendously overpriced, just like many companies overprice their accessories, and Meta is then making profit on those. So it's kind of like an after-sale profit solution. That is kind of the monetization system for Quest headsets. For smart glasses, we don't know, and I don't think anyone knows, publicly at least, what the exact revenue sharing deal is between Meta and EssilorLuxottica, the company that owns the Ray-Ban and Oakley brands. When you buy Ray-Ban Meta glasses, how much money goes to EssilorLuxottica and how much goes to Meta? We don't know. Nobody knows publicly, at least. Maybe people, obviously Meta and EssilorLuxottica know. That is not currently being reported yet. It's one of the biggest questions I have in this industry that I don't currently have the answer to, that I want to know. It's like in my top 3 questions about what's happening behind closed doors. But I suspect that Meta is not making a significant hardware profit on these glasses either. And when it comes to the new Meta Ray-Ban display glasses, it's possible they're selling that at a loss, perhaps. We don't know. That's just speculation. But that means that you then have to ask the question, what is Meta's kind of recurring revenue strategy for the glasses? You're not really buying content in the same sense, right? You're certainly not going to go out and it's not like you're buying, the $50 Deadpool game or something for your glasses. You're going to maybe have some services in the future. Maybe they sell you cloud storage for your photos eventually. Maybe they have some sort of, Meta AI Plus subscription. But I think one of the biggest ways they're going to want to monetize this is through targeted ads. And that doesn't mean that you're getting ads in your glasses. That's a kind of crude way of thinking about it that would actually make people maybe just kind of put down their glasses and not use them. A more indirect and arguably smarter from Meta's perspective as a business way to make recurring revenue is to realize that by talking to these glasses, by asking them all of the details of your life, they are getting an incredible ad targeting signal. Again, this is all from their perspective that they can use to then tailor your recommendations. It's not just, their current signals that are like things you click on Facebook and Instagram. They're not getting questions about your daily life. This is Google's business model as well. By what you Google search, they use to target ads against you. That's the fundamental business model of these two companies, targeted advertising. So Meta now is going to potentially get a stronger signal than it's ever had before about your behaviors, your habits, your hopes, your dreams, your worries. And so they don't even need to do this kind of Ready Player One cartoon idea of fill your field of view with ads. They can present those ads later on your traditional flat screen devices from what they've collected through these glasses. So I think that's why we're kind of talking about this story. This is Meta's strategy of, we often talk about, this is a company pouring billions of dollars to develop these glasses. What's the plan to make that money back? And I think this is a hint about what that is.
Another good reason to poison the input with random citations of meaningless information. Don't ask the AI anything you actually want to know. Just ask the AI really ridiculous things to just send a signal to the advertisers that you're a really bizarre individual. That's the way to win this.
So look, LL is pushing back at us and saying that my description of Meta's system, its algorithm using this information against you feels loaded. And sure, that is reasonable. For some people, they want targeted ads, right? I will completely freely admit, sometimes I have been recommended a product in an ad on Instagram that I have purchased and has improved my life. Something that is so targeted to me, and I go, you know what, that really would help. And then I buy it. And I know a lot of people who do this. It is actually, look, Meta is not a $1 trillion company for no reason. Okay. Google is not the same scale for no reason. People in tech often find this hard to believe, but there are a huge number of so-called normies who do buy products regularly based on what they get advertised on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and Google. So for some people, these ads, the companies would say they're personalized ads. The joke that you often see is in Apple's systems, when you're asked if you want to give permission for other companies to track you, Apple calls it, like data collection and harvesting. But when Apple asks you, it said, would you like to personalize your ad recommendations? So it's, personalized ads for me, data harvesting for thee. So these perspectives kind of are there. And the underlying thing here that brings it back to UploadVR, I guess, is that fundamentally products cannot be delivered for free, right? It does not free to run Facebook and Instagram, for example, or YouTube on Google's side. YouTube has a massive server cost. So there's two options there. Either you pay them a subscription, or you get ads. That is how these systems are supported. We at UploadVR offer that exact same choice. You can read our website and get ads, or you can become a member and not get ads, similarly with YouTube. And in many countries now, Meta offers the same thing for Facebook and Instagram. And I'm curious actually on the, in a sense then, if you do pay for the Instagram and Facebook subscription that gives you no ads, this wouldn't be applied to you in that sense. So, there is a kind of fundamental reality of the world that there's no such thing as a free lunch. I think that every service with ads should offer to let you pay and not get those ads. But at the same time, there is no magic third option where there is no, it's just magically being offered you for free. That's not how reality works.
And yet, over on Amazon, it's totally part of the service now to easily add to cart the current ad that is on your screen with the remote control in your hand with one button. Just add to cart and buy with exactly what's on screen. It's, everyone always wants alternatives, and alternatives will come to all of these options. But I don't feel that to bring this back to the Meta Horizon stuff that we talked about earlier. Meta doesn't ever necessarily kill anything. Like it always we're going to focus on something else. Like it always gets hidden in the back lot. Like it goes, you throw it away, and it's pausing as an idea. We're going to pause this. and it never actually, because I don't know, just it's hard for Meta ever to ever be pinned down like we killed it. And so it's hard for them for any of us to imagine them killing Horizon because there's so much attached to it. They've now bet the entire operating system on this word called Horizon. But there's this bigger thing that they're trying to actually push now, and that's Meta AI. And it's really interesting to have watched their evolution being from, hey, let's require your Facebook account to log into virtual reality headsets. Let's try advertising in VR so that some devs can try making money that way. And those ideas got rejected really, really violently by the community of people, in myself, and I think this place included, telling Meta not, this is, why are you doing this? This doesn't make sense. But what they did is they moved it all forward. They moved all of that harvesting of information to right here. And what it feels to me is like this is the surface that they want to interact with every one of the 3 billion people or whatever that they claim to interact with Facebook's services in one way, shape, or form over the course of their day or month. So it seems like Meta AI is going to become the branding for everything they do, and it will become impossible to interact with their services without going through the AI assistant first. Hey, Meta AI, someone has stolen my identity on your platform. Can you help me out? Right? That's the service plan?
Yeah, I mean, you can specifically for headsets and smart glasses, it's often faster to just use an AI assistant than to kind of use the traditional OS. We'll talk later about the Samsung headset and Android XR, where Gemini is very much so at the core. On Apple Vision Pro, because Siri is doing so much locally and actually so fast, I find myself using it so much. It's faster on Vision Pro to just say, Siri, open Safari. And on Apple Vision Pro, it has a great feature where it will open that app where you're looking. I can literally say it this quickly. I can go, Siri, open Safari, and Safari will pop up there beside me. And that's a lot faster than if I were to go, the home gesture Safari and drag it over to where I want. So you can imagine that, on right now on Quest, I don't think that's possible. Meta AI is not available in the UK on Quest, so I can't test it. But something like, hey, Meta, open browser and pointing there would be obviously a lot faster than going through and clicking in browser. So you can imagine, yes, that it does become fundamental. On smart glasses, it already is, right? It's, I've actually just received the Meta Ray-Ban display last night. And so my focus this weekend will be on that full review. But as much as I often talk about how in public you're not going to want to talk to the AI and tell it out loud what you want to do, at home in the privacy of your own home and especially bedroom, for example, it is just much faster to use your voice than to start tapping and swiping around an interface. So I do think that for Apple, for Google, for Meta, for all these companies, yes, the AI is going to be presented as the primary interaction interface over time.
Um, so that got me thinking about something I really needed to bring up with you because it was so on to what we were discussing last week and the display glasses. I've been thinking about what I want in a pair of Apple glasses or what I don't want in the display glasses. And I was thinking about the idea of Apple frames, right? Imagine a pair of frames around your eyes with no display on them, but they've got audio feedback and they can speak over your ears just like the Meta glasses do. There's maybe a camera on it for you to take pictures. But what I need is, what if it had the same quality eye tracking? You mentioned the importance of eye tracking and also the pinch tracking. If I had that in a pair of frames that's pinching, grabbing my pinches and tracking my eye movements, I've got a remote control for all my other computers. I'm now able to interact hands-free with my iPad. I could probably interact hands-free with my iPhone. I could interact hands-free with my TV, all of it, and I don't need any kind of computer whatsoever in these frames. Like I'm not interacting with it. I'm interacting with all this other stuff around me, and it's all being provided for me by the same tracking suite that's inside the Vision Pro, except applied to these simple frames.
Yeah.
And that would be you called it one half of an interaction system on our previous show. It would be the other half, but ultimately I don't need the display as much as I need the other half
Mm.
of that interaction scheme, because I
So,
just described it right. How frickin' amazing would it be if I didn't have to go touch the iPad over there? I'm using my frames, so to speak, to dismiss or change volume and do all that.
so I broadly very much so agree with you that, I'm talking about how on the current glasses, Meta AI is the kind of fundamental interaction method. If you did have eye tracking there, that would be a lot less necessary. Gaze and pinch is kind of magical, the ability to look with your eyes and pinch with your fingers. If we did have that in glasses, I think that would be the ultimate interaction method. I still would want the display though, because I think often you are going to want to do things on device. But what I think we can get both. The method of eye tracking that Meta showed off in Orion is very, very promising. It is kind of the most miniaturized, high performance eye tracking system that we've seen in a fully integrated prototype yet. And I'm sure Apple is working on some very similar stuff. So yeah, that's a good question. Would you rather have the display or eye tracking? For interacting with other objects, like smart home stuff, you can imagine being able to literally look over at your light and just get pinched like that. Magical potential. I still think I'm going to want a little bit of display feedback, but we can't have everything if make
Yeah, well,
trade-offs and choices.
yeah, this is my, we had our debate last week of where to put the different components. Where you need to put them in the thing in your pocket that's the folded case. You've got an iPhone for that, and this is my sort of response to that, and I thought we should cover it here. Hello to Black Market out there. Good evening from stormy Sweden. Suicidal saying, I don't know if we need AI for VR for voice
Yeah, I'm
control.
going to
We already
respond to that
had
one.
good voice control. Yeah.
So the
Um,
examples I just gave are very simple, right? Siri, open browser, but there are more complicated examples where I have been using Google Assistant for a decade, and I am very aware of the limits of these traditional voice interaction systems. And then I have also been using Gemini recently over the past year. And, you know, a lot of very, very smart people tried to make the traditional natural language processing NLP work. And it's my understanding is that both Alexa and Google Assistant and Siri as well, and this is part of the reason why Siri sucks a lot of the time, as well as these other systems, is that these are giant messes of spaghetti code trying to work around all of the possible edge cases about how people speak and all of the different services they can interact with and all of the different ways they can say things. And this is like the kind of one of the bitter lessons in AI. No matter how hard you try to do this, no matter how hard you try to manually classify every kind of sentence, it just doesn't work. But LLMs, large language models, just have this magic way of just being able to understand what you mean. And so no matter how weirdly you say it, no matter how if you say it wrong, you pronounce it wrong, you say the wrong word even, on text, you spell what you're asking for completely wrong. LLMs have this way of just being able to figure this out, So if I could imagine a more complicated example, Siri, open the live chat for the current VR download stream. Okay. And I need it to, from me just saying that, figure out that what I want to do is open up the pop out live chat from YouTube that you can use right now. If you're on live chat, the three little dots and pop it out as a new window, bring that window and then put it here. And it needs to understand what I mean by the new VR download, right? It needs to know that that's referring to, Upload VR's weekly podcast. All of these things are never, ever going to work on a traditional, pre-LLM voice assistant. And all of these things would work today if you had a system that was using LLM. So, I think these systems, these AI systems will be a massive part of how you interact. And what I just said, Siri, bring up the live chat for the VR download is a lot faster than me going onto a browser, going onto YouTube, searching VR download, pulling it out and putting it there. And so, yeah, I think there is a certain it just works to LLMs that it's going to be hard to replicate without them.
Back to the I gotta throw out one last idea on my Apple Frames idea, because I did throw this idea at you probably 6 months or a year ago. It was a long ago podcast, but it would be amazing if the frame. I saw someone asking about lenses and replaceable lenses, or do they have lenses? It's amazing that thing I just described of the frames where it's just got the eye tracking and your hand tracking, and basically maybe speakers over your ears to help provide audio. um, could you build that in a slim enough frame system that that's what you wear inside of your VR headset as you put it on, and you've now got prescription eye correction? Because the lenses only need, like, you could have empty holes there if you really wanted. You only need to put prescription correction in there or whatever the heck you want for various purposes. If the purpose of what I'm describing is remote control for everything, right? If that's such a great need, you could use these Apple frames when you're wearing your VR headset. When you take your VR headset off, boom, you've got remote control for everything with your prescription on them, and you're ready to go outside. Like, you don't, again, my argument, you don't necessarily need the display.
Yeah,
I
look,
need one display, my VR headset.
I agree with all you're saying until you start talking about putting it in the headset. I think at that point, as the headsets get slimmer and lighter, supporting glasses of any kind, it just gets less and less practical. The custom lens inserts are here to stay. If you would ever risk your Apple Vision Pro with glasses and not scratching the lenses, good luck to you. I don't think I don't think that would be financially sensible to do. These headsets are going to get slimmer and lighter, and it's just going to be physically impossible to fit any kind of glasses in them. And that's kind of what I think is going to happen.
Magnets are amazing. Let's go see. Yeah,
they are. Yep. Let's move on to our Apple topic then. Actually brings us really nicely onto that. So we have been talking for months now about how many reports indicate that Apple seems to be imminently launching a new Vision Pro with either the M4 or M5 chip. Supply chain analyst Ming-Chi Kuo has talked about this. Bloomberg's Mark Gurman has talked about this. There is some disagreement between reports of whether it will be the M4 or the M5. For comparison, the current Vision Pro is the M2. But it does seem quite clear that regardless of what the exact chip is, that this does seem to be happening. One of the big pieces of evidence we have is that last week, as we discussed on the show, a new Vision Pro passed through the US FCC, the US regulatory agency that checks for the wireless compliance of tech products. And so the news we have here this week is that MacRumors has found a reference in Apple code to a dual knit strap. So Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, who I said has been reporting on the idea of a Vision Pro refresh for months now, recently said that he expects 2 changes in the headset. These 2 changes, according to Gurman, are a new chip and a new strap. So that could be what MacRumors has found, the new strap. So context here. In the box, Apple Vision Pro comes with the Solo Knit Band. You can see it on screen here. It is a 3D knitted band that is really, really excellent. There are some people that mod their Quest 3 to put this on, and it's one of the most comfortable materials you could ever have for a VR headband. They've put some incredibly intricate engineering. When Apple Vision Pro came out, they had this video, The Making of Vision Pro, where they showed the 3D knitting machine that put this together. And it feels amazing. It has this like really great stretch that conforms to your head. The problem, of course, as you can see in this image, is that it doesn't have top support. And this is a heavy headset. It's around 600 grams in total. Even without, the head strap, you're still talking like 400 to 500 grams. So for many people, this just isn't sufficient to have a back strap, but no top strap. So this is all history that you will know if you follow closely, but I just want to run over it. About a month before Apple Vision Pro shipped, maybe a month or 2, 6 weeks or so, they seemed to make a last-minute decision to also include a separate strap in the box, the dual loop band. And you see here that it has support for the top of your head. It will be able to kind of distribute the weight better, but it's using a more traditional strap material. It's not this fancy 3D knitted system. It looks like very much so a kind of last-minute solution. And within a month or 2 of launching Vision Pro, Apple moved all of their in-store demos from this. So if you had a Vision Pro demo at launch day, they would put this on your head to this, because it's better from a weight distribution perspective, but it's not really more comfortable on the back and top of your head. This does feel just a little bit less comfortable pushing against you than that kind of very snug, nice, comfy Solo knit band. So that brings us to MacRumors' finding of a dual knit band. Now, I put together this little Photoshop. You can see right here, this is UploadVR mockup. I want to be crystal clear, as we always are. This is not an official image. This is something I put together hastily in Photoshop that just shows you what this might potentially possibly look like, or maybe it looks completely different. The idea here, though, I think from the name, is that this new strap will leverage Apple's 3D knitting technology to give you this comfortable, stretchy, comfy material, but for top of head support and back of head support, not just back. So I saw some people in response to this go, wow, this is a slow news day. But, I actually think that this sort of thing, things like the straps and the comfort, are critically important for these headsets. As Ian often points out, Apple Vision Pro, because of its utility, because of its resolution, because of its gaze and pinch, because of how it integrates into the Apple ecosystem, is a headset that you often want to wear for many, many hours. And it's not the experience that stops you from being in your Vision Pro all day, or at least for me, I want to be in it all day. But after a certain point, I put up with it on a flight because it's so useful, but it does get sore. It does actually start to hurt your head if you're using the default strap. And so it does look like Apple's going to try and address this. In the long term, obviously, we expect them to address it through making the headset lighter. But in the short term, a more supportive strap that uses this 3D knitting technology would be a big benefit.
Yeah, the Belkin bag is the bag I use with the Apple Vision Pro. It's the smaller bag that released about like 6 months after you put your headset in the bag. It's unbelievable that this big bulky thing fits inside this little itty bitty bag, and suddenly now you've got a strap on your side that can hold a battery pack, and your headset is up here, and you're good to go for 4 hours if you really want. And I've used it in all those scenarios exactly the same. I've got the system built down pretty well, so you can put the backpack up above you and have this little bag go underneath the seat in front of you, so you've got all the leg room, and you're good to go. You can be inside the movie watching a big screen movie before you've taken off your flight. And when the person comes over, the flight attendant comes over to stand in the middle of the aisle and present to you the pre-flight warning material of how to escape the plane if it goes down, um, the person will pop up into your experience using the person detection of the headset to show them, giving you the instructions on what to do in the flight while your movie is playing, right? Your movie's already going. So this is already a shipping system. It exists. And all of us who are at home using VR, mostly in these offices, go, I don't need that. I don't need any of that. Right. And still, like, all these little things have added up to hundreds of hours of added use by individuals here over the course of being able to have all those great features. And the screen on the outside that shows your eyes too it's won me over the time of using it as a necessary thing. In like I didn't really think it was necessary, but I'm starting to come around.
Yeah, I also love person detection. It is amazing on a flight, for example, to have it so that if a flight attendant does come up, they will, be segmented, even if you're in a virtual experience, so that you can easily kind of have awareness of them dynamically. That's something I would love to see come to other headsets. But yeah, well, in terms of this dual knit band, we'll just have to see where this goes. Right now, I personally use the Belkin strap, which is on screen here, which gives you the top strap for the solo knit band. But again, the little clasps here do kind of hurt against your head, not on the scale of an hour, but if I'm on a 10-hour flight, these sort of things do start to really matter. The one that I haven't tried, and I think I maybe can find it here, is the one from the CPAP company. There was a CPAP company that made what I'm told is the most comfortable Apple Vision Pro strap. Yes, here it is here. And this one I haven't tried, but it's quite expensive and niche. So yeah, this one actually gets you have these are little counterweights that you can attach on with Velcro.
The thing I mentioned to you that I would love is the thing that's on the Belkin pack is you put the headset into the thing, and then there's a little eye cover built into the case that slides right over the lenses of the Vision Pro. So yeah, this one. And is that it? That's it right there. So this is the little lens cover that when you put the headset in, it folds over there. So it sits right here most of the time. You got to wiggle the headset around the thing, which is a little annoying. but it's so worth it to be able to then cover the lenses and make sure that when you pull the headset out, you don't have to go flicking any hair off of the lenses because it's been covered the entire time. What I was sort of telling you that would be really interesting, usability wise, would be if the facial interface had some sort of flap like that built into it. I would take an extra, I don't know, 30 grams or something on the top of my head, just sitting up there as a flap that, I don't know, Velcros into the top of the headset when it's not in use, so it's not flapping around. And then when I pull the headset off, that flap goes right in over the lenses and it sits out wherever, again, with this core usability problem solved of light hitting the lens, dust hitting the lens, none of it. It's just covered the moment I put it down.
Yeah, there's lots of these optimizations that are kind of around the margin that make sense when you are wanting to use a headset like this, a spatial computer for many, many hours. And Apple Vision Pro kind of does show you, once you get to the utility, what are the ergonomic considerations that need to be made. Let's move on to our Samsung section now. So we have two sections left. We have a Samsung section and then a Valve section. So we have two stories about Samsung, and then we will get on to Valve. So our first story about Samsung is that a South Korean news outlet is reporting that the financial news, the South Korean news outlet is reporting that Samsung and Google plan to launch HUD glasses next year to take on Meta Ray-Ban display. So as we'll talk about in our next story, of course, Samsung and Google are partnering on a headset that is kind of taking on Apple Vision Pro in a way, but they also want glasses. So this Samsung Google partnership, Samsung handling the hardware, Google handling the software, each company playing to their strengths, is going to be a big force in this industry, I think. And a lot of the industry does seem to be underestimating what these two companies can bring to the table. Keep in mind that what happens in the first 6 months is not as important as what happens in the first 3 years in terms of this. I understand there are issues about commitment, but I'm very interested to see what does a Google Samsung take on the Meta Ray-Ban display look like. One that is, integrated with Google Maps, with Google Photos, something that as an Android user, kind of is more integrated with your phone than the Meta Ray-Ban display is. And what does Gemini look like here? I think that the big open question, we have no details about this. There's no any specific details about weight or specs. Samsung did make the reference design that was shown off at TED and Google I/O. The reference design glasses here, but that was just a reference design. And my understanding is, and this is my understanding, that these glasses here do not have a particularly good battery life. They are meant for demo. They are demo wear, and they would not have the same battery life as the Meta Ray-Ban display. So they actually do look sleeker than the Meta Ray-Ban display. They A, don't have as good battery life, and B, their waveguide actually is visible from the outside. You can kind of see, if I can find the TED image, that at a certain angle, the display is a very visible rectangle compared to the big advantage of the Meta Ray-Ban display glasses, in that you really cannot see that display externally. So again, these are just the reference design glasses that Samsung made and Google powers. The product that they come out with next year, according to this report, could be incredibly different. We don't know that. But I have so many open questions here. And I think the biggest question of all is, what is their answer to the Meta neural band? Do we see a Samsung neural band? Do they just literally say, here's REMG? There's nothing. Meta has invested a long time in it, but that doesn't mean another company can't do it. Here's the image I was looking for, by the way, of the reference design having this incredibly visible from certain angles waveguide. But yeah, so what is Google and Samsung's answer here? This demo that we saw at TED and I/O, it was all Gemini based, coming back to our discussion earlier about AI as the interaction method. Everything was Gemini do this, Gemini do that, Gemini, what's this? But as Ian and I both found in our time with Meta Ray-Ban display, the ability to discreetly and subtly use finger gestures to navigate the interface means that you can more comfortably use it in public. As I always say on this podcast, nobody is going to want to send an intimate message to their wife while they're on a bus or a subway or a train with other people around them. scratch nobody, the majority of people, anyone who's seeing. So there are always going to be ways that you need a discrete input system. What's their solution going to be here? Is it going to be a neural band? Is it going to be like some of the Chinese companies? They have like a little smart ring, right? Samsung makes a smart ring. It doesn't have an input system. Could they add it? Could they have little taps on the smart ring? I don't know. Let's find out.
Yeah, I think we're ready to move on to the next one pretty quickly here. Those were good questions that we do want to see. We saw early tests. I think it was the double pinch thing that we tried. That's not the name of it, but we tried some of those gestures that were synced up between watches and smart home devices a while back. And I think some of the people that were involved in that were involved in other projects before. But point is, we'll see all of these things promise to work together in various ways. The question is, how much do they actually improve your day to day in real world scenarios? Are you waiting 2 seconds for some of these things to happen? And we're going to see that sort of thing broken down in your review as soon as we get your display glasses review out. The next bit of news, though, is the juicy bit of this that we need to get into.
Sure. There's just one more thing I want to bring up on this, which is a commenter here. Mastoris is suggesting that Samsung could release a new Galaxy watch that has EMG technology in it. So it's a Samsung Galaxy Neural Watch or something like that. They could also try to do it with just the regular watch sensors, right? So on Apple Watch, they can detect a double pinch. I don't think they currently have a reliable single pinch on the same, but my understanding is that it's a double pinch that they can detect. So you can imagine using that for certain interactions, but when you get to the more specific, precise interactions like swiping your finger or twisting a knob, I think you're going to need EMG technology there. But you could imagine at least using the watch in a more traditional way. Maybe you use the dials on the watch to control your glasses interface. There's an integration there between your Samsung Galaxy Watch and your Galaxy glasses. That's a name, I'm presuming, by the way. They haven't announced the name. I'm seeing a few people point out there was a viral post recently of the Samsung Ring. If you're wondering what am I talking about, smart rings like an Oura ring. These are little products that are essentially like Fitbits, but in a ring form factor. A Samsung Ring recently had a swollen battery that meant that the wearer couldn't get it off their finger. And I think they had to end up using some sort of metal cutter to get it off. So I think a few people are doing that. I see Christoph pointing out that they can pause and resume podcasts on their double pinch gesture with their Samsung smartwatch, but that's super limited. They say, yeah. So I don't doubt that you can get a double pinch on these watches. You can use the IMU to figure that out and things like their traditional health sensors. But the precision of the Ray-Ban, the Meta Ray-Ban display with the Meta Neural Band, things like swiping around like this, you're going to need EMG. But
you can do the double pinch on an Apple Watch too for the very same task of answering calls. Yes. And there's one really. So I wanted to add the double pinch so you do the double pinch right here on your middle finger to turn on the display and turn it off on the Meta glasses. But very clearly, like it's also this is forward and back is one pinch, and those feel right. Forward and back through menus. The middle pinch is your back gesture, just one, and forward with the other gesture. But the fact that you have to answer calls with a double pinch and then turn off and turn on a display with double pinches feels like those aren't necessarily gonna, like, I don't know if I want to use those gestures as much as the other gestures. The other ones seem so important, and the other ones seem so natural for gaze-based eye pinch interfaces. So like I think we're going to have the one pinch in and maybe the second pinch out be with us across all these platforms going forward. But you got to get eye tracking on all your devices, and you got to have an operating system that incorporates all these things. And maybe I'm wrong about these gestures. I'm just
I like the specific exact implementation of the gestures. Obviously, there's a lot of room for improvement there, I think, but fundamentally, I do think you do need SEMG. You need surface electromyography to detect these precision. There are some people who have this idea of, the Apple Watch, we'll just use pinches there. I did try a friend's on this because I was so curious about it. It's not that same kind of precision.
Did you see James' comment, or was that what you were responding there? I still don't know how you get away from phantom clicks. That's one of the things that's really interesting about the electro technology, because it is very much listening to your intent a little bit more, right?
Yeah, and I was just going to point out that's something that's going to be in my review, but just as a quick preview on your exact question, it will not think that you holding a crisp is a pinch. This EMG this is what I'm always trying to kind of get away from this idea that traditional watches with traditional health sensors are going to be anywhere near this. EMG is so precise that it does know the difference between you holding a crisp between your fingers and your fingers touching. And so that's something that I'm so far a little kind of preview for my review, but I am shocked by how good the rejection of unintentional things are. Things even, for example, like I'm washing my hands. You may think surely at some point in washing your hands, there's going to be a false click. Nope, absolutely not. Not in my experience, at least. I don't know when you had it. Did you try something like washing your hands?
I didn't do washing my hands, and I'm trying to remember if there were any. I don't think there were any missed clicks. The missed clicks happened while I was actively using the interface, and
Sure.
could have been UI related, and the chip not responding as quickly. It was
I
not related
agreed.
to the only thing I had was the arm bar where I'm laying my arm on the bar of a bike, and I'm trying to pinch. And it's messing with the signal at my wrist. I think
Hmm.
that somehow made some interference, such that it couldn't see the pinch intent.
Yeah, but I think, false negatives, sure, there are definitely some sort of solutions there, but false positives I have not encountered. So yes, I expect over time that the Apple Watch and Galaxy Watch and such will get SEMG technology. And I'm not saying this is going to be unique to Meta, but my argument here is very strongly they will not figure this out without SEMG. You will not just magically one day have your current Apple Watch get a software update to do this.
Arlen is pointing out that crisps mean chips to us Americans, and
Yes.
our chips are French fries to British people. Let's not do this. Let's move on to the Samsung Galaxy XR, including controllers with a leak and render images. And then we've got the Valve story to close out that
Yeah.
after. I'm going to have to go out at the top of the hour because I've got a hard stop. So I'll leave you with David as we get through this last bit of news. I guess I should just looking at these headlines, this isn't going to be any of the ends of the stories here with each of these two big players, Samsung and Valve. As we've sort of indicated through the show, by all indications, the moment for VR to have its next wave of hardware is just about here. That by all indications, we're going to get a large wave of news here sometime in the near future. We don't know where specific things are going to land on which dates yet, but we've got enough fire here in public that it's pretty indicative. FCC filings, right? Like that's not the same bit of news as we've had in the past. So things are building, and it's going to be a very busy couple months here for us at UploadVR.com. And as we cover what we've been able to find out now, I just want you to be back here in the next couple of weeks with us, the next couple months as we follow on this journey. Have some patience with us if we have to delay our show like we do on days like today, because news drops and news keeps dropping right as we're coming into the studio. So expect that to happen in the future, and we will get in here as soon as we can. And that's sort of my long-winded way of explaining why I have to get out of here at the top of 3, when it would have been great to have been here for another hour with you all, and I look forward to you next week. I want to just make that one more comment here to try to tune in to VR Sideload tomorrow as Don Hopper runs through all of our gaming news, and or at least some of our gaming news, and shows you some of our most recent videos. It'll be a recap of some of the things you've already seen on our channel, but we're going to start building on the VR Sideload as an idea as we get you all the gaming news you need to know about, all the places you need to visit inside of VR. We're going to try to get those highlighted for you on VR Sideload. And, it doesn't matter what storefront they're on. It's part of that philosophy thing I was saying earlier in the show. So tune into that on VR Sideload tomorrow. David, I've got, 5 more minutes with you here. Let's talk about the Samsung Galaxy XR bit of news.
Sure, yeah. Let's definitely talk about this. We've just talked about the Apple headset. We're going to talk later about the Valve headset, but we have so many high-end headsets here. So this is a seeming leak from Android headlines. And so, according to Android headlines, Samsung Galaxy XR, which is what we now expect the name for the product will be, the first Android XR headset, Samsung's hardware, Qualcomm's chip, Google's software, that it will have controllers in the box. And this is, according to Android headlines, a leaked marketing image showing said controllers. So when Ian tried the Samsung headset back in December, God, that's 10 months ago now, um, he was told by Samsung that they are working on controllers, but they never confirmed, and they still have not to this day, whether there will be controllers in the box or whether they might be some sort of paid accessory. According to this Android headlines report, they will be in the box. So this particular piece of news is very relevant because Valve last week announced that it would make the APK for Steam Link VR available for sideloading on any Android-based headset. Already, it put it on the Pico and Vive store, but even the APK they've now made available. So Play for Dream, for example, is now distributing that on their Discord to their users, and people are using foveated encoding on Play for Dream to play Steam Link, accessing their PC VR titles via their PC. And so the combination of this having controllers and the Steam Link APK now being available there for anyone to sideload means that my understanding here is that on day one, it should be possible for you to simply sideload Steam Link VR onto the Galaxy XR headset and use these controllers to access Steam VR. Now, it's possible also, maybe Valve has already spoken with Google and Samsung and it'll be there on day one. We don't know. We're going to have to wait for a proper announcement for that. But at the very least, you should be able to sideload it. So that's kind of the direct relevance of this, as well as, of course, the fact that this means standalone developers will want to be able to bring their content to Android XR. It's a very different strategy here from Apple, where Apple does support PSVR 2 controllers as a Vision OS 26, but Sony has not yet started selling those separately, despite the fact that it was expected that they would do so on the release of Vision OS 26. So if you did want to add PlayStation VR 2 controllers to your Vision Pro, today you have to go out and spend the $400 for a new PSVR 2 or whatever the price is you can find on eBay and Facebook Marketplace. So it's not a practical market for developers to build for Apple Vision Pro. But Android XR is, even though we expect that this will be a limited launch with a high-priced headset that might only be available in South Korea, maybe some other countries, at the very least, they can use the same Android XR app that they built for Quest and Pico or whatever, the same OpenXR app that they built for Quest and Pico and bring it to Galaxy XR and have controllers available to every user out of the box if Android headlines report is accurate.
Yep. It is going to be a big moment. I see Gamertag VR out there. Thank you for tuning in. And hello to you out there. And hello to all of our regular commenters, Biggs, and everyone else as we get to the big part of this show, right? This is the thing. People were sort of annoyed by us talking about dual knit bands and all those other things. They really want to hear about this one as well as the next one. I don't know, is there anything more specific that we know about this right now? Is there?
About the headset, I guess we should, say what we know about the headset. So they've officially announced multiple times that this will have the Snapdragon XR2 Plus Gen 2 chipset. So that is the slightly higher end version of the chip that's in Quest 3 and 3S, which is now 2 years old. So that is one kind of concern here. As I always say, Quest 1, Quest 2, Quest 3, Galaxy XR. You can see it's only a slight bump, but it is a bump. They have not said officially much more, to be honest. They've said it'll have an external battery, and Ian tried it with the external battery. Eye tracking and hand tracking is something that they have confirmed, as well as state-of-the-art displays. This Android headlines leak includes dozens of photos of the headset itself, as well as this one image of the controllers, dozens of renders, I should say. These renders do quite clearly show us the exact sensor suite. So maybe I'll run over that. We can see that it has 6 tracking cameras in total. So 1, 2, 3, 4, not the middle two. Those are the color pass-through cameras. The other 2 tracking cameras are down here. So you have a Quest 2 and PlayStation VR 2, like, 4 tracking cameras on the side, just what you're used to on your Quest 2 or PSVR 2, but it also has these 2 tracking cameras on the bottom, like Apple Vision Pro. In theory, these should be positioned to do face tracking, but that has not been confirmed at all. I don't see any reason on a technical level why they couldn't attempt it. I think these are more specifically meant, though, for tracking your hand gestures when your arms are at rest. So that kind of situation we're talking about with EMG, where your hands are quite low at rest on the seat, for example, that's what these tracking cameras are mainly for. We also see in this leak, in these renders, quite clearly that there are, according to Android headlines, 4 eye tracking cameras, 2 per eye. That's the same as Vision Pro. That gives you the eye tracking precision necessary to do gaze and pinch. Additionally, so on the front, we have these 2 color pass-through cameras, what you'd expect, right? 1 for each eye, but also, according to Android headlines, a depth sensor up here so that you get hardware level depth, and that can be used for, creating a dynamic scene mesh, and safety features like not needing a guardian, yet being able to tell you when you're going to bump into an object. So we have seen the headset itself many times, right? There are dozens of photos online. It was at many tech events, even many events where they didn't demo it. They had it on a stand like this. People have seen this thing. It's not new. You can see these sensors here. The real kind of news this week, according to this report, is that it will include controllers in the box, according to Android headlines.
Siegfried out there asking, will Steam Frame have bottom cameras like Apple Vision Pro? Bold of you to assume that the Steam Frame or whatever Valve ships would have hand tracking. By the last indications were that the controller button layouts 1-to-1 matched what you get out of a gamepad. You have all the inputs on a controller on a controller in each hand now that you would have if you had an actual controller in your hand. That is a wonderful scheme for working with all existing Steam VR games as well as all existing Steam Deck games with the controllers in your hand right there. I don't see how hand tracking would enhance that situation in any way, shape, or form. If you're trying to make something that works with the existing Steam library.
It depends on their scope will be. Let's move on to that topic. Hopefully, if a few minutes, maybe you can jump in.
I think I can do it real quick for a few minutes.
So the last thing to recap on Galaxy XR is, according to the reports, we expect it to be north of $2,000, very limited launch, very limited units, a kind of very small paper launch for Android XR. Probably more of a developer kit on the grand scheme of things than a true consumer launch, but we do expect that if you are a consumer in a country where they sell it, you'll be able to get it. Let's see what happens. According to the South Korean reports from places like ET News, we expect that this headset could launch as early as this month. Dates are being thrown around in late October in these reports, and it seems entirely possible, but we don't know. So let's move on to talk about that Valve news. So according to the Chinese analyst group XR Research Institute, Valve's new headset has entered mass production already, with an estimated annual production scale of around 500,000 units and a likely release window of the holiday season in time for Black Friday and Christmas. So that's roughly the same scale as Apple Vision Pro. For a comparison, 500,000 is their estimate for this Steam headset. For comparison, Quest 3 and 3S are probably somewhere around 3 million based on how many people have unlocked the introductory experience achievement.
So I see people talking about the hand tracking thing now in the comments, and I just want to go with this use case. Imagine you're in bed, you're laying, looking at the ceiling, and you want to play Stardew Valley, some game you love that is a totally flat game. You have your hands below the covers because the air conditioning is blowing on you. It's cold in there, and you can still input and control the game with one hand at your side laying next to you, your other hand laying next to you. Theoretically here, with all of those inputs on those controllers here, you see L1 and L2, L1, L2, R1, R2, and you've got all of your gamepad controllers under the covers while you're watching this. And again, you could pull, if you need the tracking, you pull them out and maybe you do a VR game, hypothetically. You don't want to do that in bed necessarily. I don't think it's going to do that. But that specific use case I'm describing of interacting with a flat window over there that's playing a game is going to be wonderful in that situation I described. And it's not aided by hand tracking. Like, we did our whole previous podcast about talking about the idea of wearing the neural band for the very same scenario of under the covers and still being to pinch through your interface in VR or control things on screen. Yeah, anything specific to respond to that?
I don't know whether it'll have hand tracking. We don't know very much about this headset. There are lots of indications about Steam VR and the software, but when it comes to the hardware of the headset, there really have been no credible leaks. There was that one proof of concept device that was found to have, a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 chip and 2K LCD screens, but that could have been some, candidate they tried out 2 years ago. We know far more about the controllers. What you see on screen now, if you're not familiar, is the leak from late last year. I think it was December, where these are the 3D models that were found in Steam VR that are likely to be maybe not final because it's been a year since then, but near final depictions of what these controllers will look like. And as Ian is pointing out, they have this D-pad here and they have a bumper as well as a trigger. That means that they can emulate a gamepad. They have all the same controls. That looks like flat screen gaming will be a very strong focus of this, but we don't know much else. Valve has confirmed many times that they're working on a headset, okay? They have said a lot of things about wireless streaming from your PC. So I think what we can say about Steam Frame, or if that's even what it's called, we keep saying Steam Frame because they trademarked that a few weeks ago. All I think we can say is that it's clearly designed to be able to play flat screen games without an extra gamepad needed, that wireless streaming from your PC will be a massive focus. But beyond that, it gets into, like, what are we speculating based on? It's very difficult to know. I think this is interesting and what's the word I'm looking for here? Exciting, because with all of these other headsets and glasses, we seem to know everything about them before they arrive. But with Valve's, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know.
Yep. And with that, I'm going to pop out of here. Thank you, David. If there's anything else you want to respond to the comments, but I just want to say thank you to all of our patrons out there. Justin, congrats on the launch of the Brookhaven experiment. I want to make that call out, I guess, on our podcast. If you haven't ever seen the Brookhaven experiment or experienced it, it's, I can't remember what their launch price is, but it is a window into what VR was like back in 2016. That you can have back in 2025 now, and experience sort of what was the source of the term zombie wave shooter in VR, right? That wasn't really a genre before Brookhaven Experiment hit the market, and so now you can check that out on Quest right now. Thank you to our wonderful commenters. I'll see you in the future.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ian, for being here, and we'll be able to join Ian next week. I'll finish off, I guess, by going into some further discussion with the commenters about Valve. There's one comment I want to bring up about the Samsung headset here. Alexander Roska says 2 times the pixels of Quest 3 and only about 20% of extra GPU does not seem right. And that's in relation to the Samsung headset, because we also expect that it will use 4K micro OLED displays just like Apple Vision Pro and Play for Dream MR. So I think how you square the circle there is that display resolution and render resolution are not the same thing to start with. In VR, they're actually very, very disentangled. There is no real one-to-one because of how the lens distortion works. You will often render at a very different resolution than this display resolution. And so that's one component here. So it's not necessarily true that they actually will be rendering 2 times the pixels. if you're playing the same game on Samsung Galaxy XR versus Quest 3. The other factor is eye tracked foveated rendering. Quest 3 does not have eye tracking, nor does Quest 3S. Samsung will. So they will have 20% extra GPU plus dynamic foveated rendering. But that still doesn't get you to 2 times, right? And I don't expect it'll be 2 times. The thing is, the extra display resolution will be useful. It's not that you'll be in standalone gaming running on the headset and everything will be super duper crisper than Quest 3. It's more that when you're doing things like having a remote desktop of your PC or a browser window, those 2D panels can be rendered in much higher resolution because the display is able to deliver you many more pixels per degree. And so when you're trying to do things like virtual monitors, when you're trying to do things like have a giant 4K HDR cinema screen in front of you, when you have small text that's being rendered on a compositor layer, for example, because you can render text layers and other visual layers at a different resolution than the rest of the world, for example. These are the types of places where 4K micro OLED shines even on standalone. And also, if you're going to use this for Steam Link, or maybe virtual desktop comes, right? We'll have to see. I don't think Geek Odin's made any announcements around that yet. The other question I had, by the way, I saw on the Apple one that we didn't get to address is, if you do have the PlayStation VR 2 controllers, can you play Steam VR on Vision Pro by streaming to your PC? Not officially. There's no Steam Link. There's no Apple Link, right? But you can use an app called ALVR, which is actually the OG solution for this. It was around before anything that we talk about, and it's the open source solution. So there is a ALVR port for Vision Pro that you can use with your PSVR 2 controllers. We've reported on this back at Apple's WWDC. So getting from a standalone headset to your PC is a software problem that is very, very quickly figured out. But so I see Big saying eye tracked dynamic foveated rendering is a huge gain. It's big, but it's not as big as some people think it is, especially on mobile architecture, tiled GPU, and especially at these kind of resolutions. The higher the resolution, the more gain you get. But some people have this idea still that it's like 10x, and it's not. Okay, you're talking, 30 to 80%, depending on the exact workload, depending on the resolution. It's not a silver bullet, but I do think that it's at 4K resolution, it's more and more important. Still not a silver bullet. And you have to remember that the one problem I think with the Samsung headset is that, based on our understanding of this using the XR2 Plus Gen 2, that's already weaker than the M2 that's in Apple Vision Pro today. If Apple comes out with an M4 and M5, M4 has a 50% more powerful CPU and 4 times more powerful GPU than M2. If it's M5, it's even greater than that. So the Apple headset that we expect to arrive is going to leave every Android headset in the dust when it comes to performance. Vision Pro already is better, but it's not like people have this idea that Vision Pro is like in a different league. It's better than Quest 3 in performance. Of course it is. But it's not like the M4 and the M5 is going to be like an order of magnitude. It's like going to be insanely better. And you're going to get like close to PC VR level fidelity on the new Vision Pro that we expect to arrive. And then Samsung's going to be, just a bit better. So Hard to Get is saying Red Matter 2 and Hitman WA have a huge gain with eye tracking on PSVR 2. Yes, PSVR 2 is a traditional GPU architecture. It's not a mobile tiled renderer. The kind of mobile GPU that is used in these standalone headsets is quite different from your traditional x86 GPU that you would have from NVIDIA and AMD. So you do get better gains from eye-tracked foveated rendering. Look, don't get me wrong. Eye-tracked foveated rendering is essential for any 4K micro OLED headset. You do get a gain from it. All I'm pointing out is it's not orders of magnitude or anything like that. That's all I'm trying to point out. It's not going to turn a Quest 3 into a Vision Pro or something like that. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not going to turn it into a PC headset. It's important. You get a gain from it, but again, it also massively depends on the specific title. Look at Flight Simulator on PC. You're not doubling your frame rate. You're getting 30 to 50%, depending on what's going on. Coming back to Steam Frame, I think the biggest question about Steam Frame is, to what degree will it focus on standalone without a PC? To what degree will it just be a very polished wireless headset? And I have, there is a lot of data mining that shows that Valve is definitely working on some degree of standalone. But I stick to my conviction that I've had, that I think the primary focus from a VR gaming perspective is going to be streaming to your PC. There is obviously going to be some degree of playing standalone. You can already see that Quest 3 is proof positive that you can do pretty decent VR on standalone. Apple Vision Pro is an example that if you put a really, really high-end chip, you can go even further. But fundamentally, you're not going to get the performance of your, 10 kilogram, 600 watt plus drawing gaming PC in something that goes in your head and runs off a battery, whether that battery be on the back of your head, the front of your head, or in your pocket. The amount of energy that your PC is drawing from the power socket is immense compared to a battery. If you tried to put that performance in a headset, it would run out of battery in a minute and overheat, and your face would just go on fire. Okay, you look at this. Many people here, if you're a PC gamer, you've built a PC. Look at your PC. Look at the size of those fans. Look at what is the most important aspect of designing the internal sort of layout of your PC. It's airflow, right? It's about how do you get cool air in and exhale hot air. Try to imagine trying to put that performance, even if the energy wasn't a problem, even if you wore a battery backpack that was just a giant battery in your back. Think of the thermal aspect here. So with anything that goes on your head that has to be portable will be dealing with orders of magnitude less energy than things that go on that draw from power socket. I actually saw a really interesting new handheld out, like a Steam Deck competitor, where it doesn't have a battery in it. Instead, you always plug it into a power socket, which is a really interesting idea. And that's the most powerful handheld. And people use that as an example of, oh, look, this chip is delivering, it could probably run Half-Life Alyx. Yeah, it runs off a power socket. That's a lot less appealing for VR. Theoretically, someone could make an interesting headset that worked like that, right? That it is standalone, but it's not wireless. We often talk about standalone and wireless like they're interchangeable. Theoretically, you could make a standalone headset that a giant cable comes out of the back of it and goes to your power socket instead of a PC. So it's kind of got the cable aspect of traditional PC VR, but without the need for the PC. That would be an interesting product. It would be super interesting. I hope someone tries it just for the sheer novelty of it, but that's not what I think some people are going to do. So I see Alexander Rosa here pointing out some of the scale here. Steam Deck uses about a 20 watt chip, while a gaming laptop about 200 watts, and a high-end PC goes above 600 watts. This is the fundamental physics. You can't change the laws of physics. Can you absolutely, deliver a really interesting standalone experience? Sure, but there's this delusion people have of standalone PC VR. And there's two things that people mean by it. People use this to mean two things, and that's why these conversations get so blurred. There's the software aspect of that. There is, what if a standalone headset ran a Linux-based OS, Steam OS, right, and could run desktop level software and have full file system access and have all of the freedom and extensibility of Linux? That part, 100%, nothing fundamentally stops you from doing that in a standalone headset. Valve could do it tomorrow, right? I'm not saying you can't do that. And that has big advantages, right? You can bring in the same software you would run on Linux. You can even, do some of the fancy Proton and Wine stuff and run Windows software standalone without having to use some of the, we've seen on Quest, there's Wingulator XR, but you can do that in a more performant way. with Valve system in a more kind of widely compatible way. Same thing that made Steam Deck magic. But the reason that Steam Deck can run all of your PC games is because it runs at 800p, right? Which is like 1,000,000 pixels and maybe 30 or 40 frames per second, depending on the title. VR, you can't use that trick. Going to portable VR, the resolution is still the same, right? Like you can't say, let's just do the same thing, but run it like a fraction of the resolution because it'll look horrible. It'll be a blurry mess. That's the thing about VR. So you can't use the Steam Deck's trick of we'll just run down the resolution. So the other meaning of standalone PC VR is that you magically have the performance of a gaming PC, but without a gaming PC. And it's like, that's just not possible. I would love to be wrong about this. You know, if Valve finds some magical way of completely doing rendering differently in a way that's much more power efficient than anyone has ever done, it would still have to, you know, be a new engine. It would have to be something they put into Source 2. There's no magic silver bullet here is all I'm saying. So will Deckard have standalone experiences? Will you be able to play Beat Saber and Pistol Whip standalone? Maybe like a low graphics or ultra low graphics mode of Half-Life Alyx? Sure, maybe. Maybe. But will it run, you know, Flight Simulator standalone? Will you run Elite Dangerous standalone? Will you have like the PC VR quality version of Arizona Sunshine 2 and Metro Awakening and Behemoth and Alien? No, like fundamentally no. Now, that doesn't mean that Valve can't just make a really, really high-end, a really refined and amazing Steam Link experience. It doesn't mean that, for example, one of the things that we've seen many references to is a Steam VR Link dongle. So instead of having to rely on your home Wi-Fi network, maybe Valve's headset comes with a little dongle in the box that has, you know, Wi-Fi 6E, so a 6 gigahertz connection, maybe even Wi-Fi 7 for, you know, even higher quality 6 gigahertz direct connection from your PC to your headset. That would be amazing. Maybe they have it so that it's so seamless that it's you put on the headset and within 5 seconds you're in Steam VR. You don't even need to, you know, click Steam Link or do anything else. You're in Steam VR when you put on the headset. There are so many ways to imagine. If you're the company that makes Steam and Steam VR and you're making a hardware product, even if Steam Frame or Deckard or whatever you want to call it has zero standalone. Now, I'm not saying it will, but even if it did, I still think Valve could make an incredible product. They could make something that is essentially like a Quest 3, but perfectly designed for PC VR and has, you know, better displays, better comfort, better integration, a wireless dongle in the box. All of this could still make an amazing product. I just really want to continue to say that you're not going to magically run. You're not going to magically get a 10 kilogram, 600 watt PC under your head ever. And yeah, people are asking what chip is this going to use? We don't know. Again, we don't know anything about the headset. There's a lot of evidence that they're going to use some sort of Qualcomm chip. It would be really weird for the Samsung headset to come out with the XR2 Plus Gen 2 and then Valve to roll out a few months later or a month later, whatever the hell they're going to launch with a, you know, next generation Qualcomm chip. Like, why would Samsung not get that? Samsung is a massive partner for Qualcomm. That would be really, really weird. So that makes me think it is unlikely that Valve's headset will have like an XR2 Gen 3 that is a true next gen. Maybe Samsung's headset was just so delayed that that's just where they're stuck. But that would be an odd situation given Samsung and Qualcomm have such a good relationship that there are like special editions of Qualcomm's phone chips in the latest Samsung Galaxy flagships. You have like the Snapdragon 8 Elite Galaxy Edition. So that's how tight these companies are with each other. I'm not saying Valve and Qualcomm might have had a great relationship in secret in building this headset. I just think Qualcomm, it would be a bizarre situation for Qualcomm to piss off one of their closest companies to then give Valve some magic future chip. So if I had to guess, this is a guess, I don't know, I would say that Valve Deckard probably would be using the XR2 Plus Gen 2, the same as Play for Dream and Samsung Galaxy XR. But that is, once again, a guess, and we simply do not have any reliable rumors or leaks of any kind to say what this headset has. Now, everything I just talked about, by the way, is about VR gaming. And Ian was obviously talking about the other idea of using playing flat screen games. And so I see people talking about some really interesting stuff Valve could do there. Whether that be, I mean, it could pair with a literal Steam Deck, right? They could say that, the best accessory for your Steam frame is a Steam Deck. And so your Steam Deck is there and it's rendering a flat screen game. And then the flat screen game is being presented on a giant screen. Maybe they think about how amazing. People are saying in the comments, would Valve really launch something without being groundbreaking? The hardware and software integration details can be groundbreaking in the same way that I can look with my Vision Pro on my head at my MacBook and pinch, and the MacBook display will turn off and instantly turn into a giant ultra wide display. Maybe I look at my Steam Deck with my Steam frame on, and the Steam Deck display turns off. It turns into a giant virtual monitor. I'm in Steam VR Theater, and then I'm using the Steam Deck as a controller while I'm able to then play those games. And maybe, as we talk about, maybe they can do some automatic 3D injection. Maybe it's not just a 2D version of this game. Maybe I'm playing my favorite Steam game, but with a Valve system level injector that brings 3D into these titles. Maybe it's an SDK that lets developers do this easily. Maybe Valve says, developers on Steam, please integrate 3D today. Here's your, Steam 3D SDK. We want to make this everywhere. And then left, right, and center, developers start implementing it. There's so many things Valve could do here without breaking the laws of physics. Like, I think in some ways, Valve's next headset is doomed by crazy expectations, but there are still amazing things that Valve could do that are completely within the law of physics, and engineering. I see some people mentioning, what if it uses a hold on, what if it uses a non-XR chip? What if it has 2 chips? Yeah, there's all these solutions. There are solutions. Fundamentally, still, even if you're using the latest and greatest phone chip, that's going to drive up cost dramatically, by the way. You're going to be talking about a very expensive headset unless they're seriously subsidizing it. Yeah, I think even at power level, right, 2 chips, power draw would be insane. You'd be talking about a giant tethered battery or something in the back of your head or something. I see some people saying, what if it's an AMD SoC? Well, like the battery that's in a Steam Deck, for example, is like twice the size of a battery in a Quest 3. So then you're like, where is this battery going? Are you going to have 2 batteries, one on each pocket? Maybe. Like there are crazy ideas you could pull off here without staying in the laws of physics. You could literally have the Apple Vision Pro approach, but you have 2 batteries. And so both of your pockets are now holding the batteries, and then you charge 2 batteries, and that's how they get a level of performance. There are creative workarounds here, but they still don't get you a 600-watt PC on your head anytime soon, Yeah, and like Simon asks, can't you kind of run PC VR games on a ROG Ally X? Yeah, so you can run them at like low resolution, low frame rate. It's not about whether you can run these things. You can run Half-Life Alyx on a Steam Deck and power your headset off a Steam Deck today, right now. And people will put up YouTube videos and tweets and go, whoa, look, I'm running Half-Life Alyx on my Steam Deck and it's going to my headset. And then you look at the asterisks, the small text, the details. Oh, it was at such a low resolution that everything's blurry. It's at 30 frames per second. So everything feels terrible. The battery runs out in 1 hour. It's the details. It's not about whether you can run these things. It's about, would Valve sell a product for $1,000 plus that you run all your Steam VR games in a blurry, low frame rate environment? No, of course they wouldn't. That would suck. I see people asking Valve console for living room. I think that would be a great idea. That would be a solution to what I'm talking about, right? I'm saying, you can't turn the 600-watt box in the living room onto your head. Well, in the corner of your uh, office onto your head. Well, what if you get a Valve console? So even if you aren't a PC gamer, you can do this. You can play flat screen games on your TV, or wirelessly with one click, you can have it create an automatic connection to your headset, do all of this super, super seamless, magically integrated software. It all just works. You put the Steam frame on your head and it instantly says connect to nearby Steam Blade. I always use Steam Blade as my example name, but I'm just making that up. I'm not saying I have any knowledge of a name. It connects to your Steam Blade onto your TV and kaboom, you're in VR instantaneously. Lots of amazing things you could do here. See Steve Barr making a funny joke, half res Alex. Yeah, you could do half res Alex. Yeah. Shallow Alaska is saying it will do Steam Deck in a flat window and it will do VR as well as a Quest 3. That's the end of it. I'm even skeptical of the idea that it's going to run like Cyberpunk on a flat window standalone. Like, are we really saying that you're going to, on a mobile chip, have like, that is also, again, because it's not just running it on a, an 800p screen. You're also, okay, so Steam Deck runs Cyberpunk, yeah, like, 720p or whatever, 30, 40 FPS. Are we then imagining that you're going to do this in VR, which again, at that size, once you blow it up to a giant monitor, 720p just doesn't look good. You want more than 1080p even. At that size, you're like, damn, I want 4K. I've had experience with Apple Vision Pro of using it for flat screen Steam Link and using Moonlight and some of these other applications. It looks great at 4K. It really does when you have a giant screen like this. 1080p, you're like, I want more. 720p, no, it works on Steam Deck because it's a little 7-inch screen in your hand. It doesn't work on a 70-inch screen, Same way that it doesn't look good if you put on a giant TV. So, yeah. LL is asking, is it a given you will review this headset if it launches? Sure, absolutely we'll be reviewing it. We'll move heaven and earth to review this. Smart Light Dimwit saying, I think Valve will release a particle laser that can scan people and transport them to a game grid. Yeah, that's honestly what some of these expectations sound like. Once again, there would be nothing in this world that I would be more happy to be wrong about than if Valve could magically deliver PC VR standalone. If you could deliver PC VR standalone, as in the experience of going into the PC VR version of Skydance Behemoth or Metro Awakening or any of these games, Arizona Sunshine 2, not the mobile Quest version, but the PC VR version, that would be industry shattering. It would be the most groundbreaking thing the industry has ever done. And I genuinely hope someone does it. I hope someone figures out something. I hope that there are people, I know that there are people much smarter than me that are working on it, and I hope they could magically do it. I really do. Arlen Kundert saying a Steam gaming puck bigger than Alexa, but that idea would be a good solution. I mean, look, fundamentally, that's a PlayStation 5, right? Like, all these times people are talking about, well, what if we have an external compute unit that is rendering the VR experience, that, maybe it's drawing power from a socket. And all I can think is, like, you're describing a PlayStation 5. That's what happens when you're using that is PlayStation VR 2. It's just Sony's doing it wired instead of wireless. Like, if you had a wireless PlayStation VR 2, that's what you're describing there, right? Like, it's, But we'll have to see. Look, we'll have to see. I think, like, if they are doing a big standalone push, it will be just like Quest, right? You'll be running the Quest version of these games standalone in your headset. Not literally the Quest version. I'm not saying like it's literally the actual APK. I'm saying the graphical fidelity of that. Even if it is running x86, for example, it is going to be using the graphical assets from that. It's going to be either a ultra low mode on these really high fidelity games, or it's going to be a specific new Steam section, a section of Steam that's like, frame standalone games or something like that. Free Sky saying, maybe you could run it super low res PC VR and then you use some magic AI algorithm to upscale on standalone. So, look, PlayStation 5 Pro does that. It's PSSR. PSSR is a AI upscaling algorithm. You can go and try it in No Man's Sky if you have a PlayStation 5 Pro and a PSVR 2. I did. It's great. It's not magic though. It makes the game a bit sharper and look better. It's not magic. It doesn't turn the PS5 Pro into a 6090 or something. It's just like it's great, but AI upskilling even has its limits. I'm sure in future that will get better and better, and I'm fascinated to see what does it look like if you have these crazy transformer based upskilling models that are running on standalone. Super interesting to imagine what that might be like in 5 years. I don't think we're there yet. Okay. We've had a lot of discussion about this. I've heard a lot of interesting ideas. I want to fundamentally remind you that a lot of stuff we are talking about today is speculative. We don't know. We think we know a lot about the controllers. We think, based on this Chinese report, that it could be imminent. But I think the last question I'm going to bring up before we end is Simon Says' question. Do you think their goal is trying to dethrone the Quest 3, or are they trying to appeal to the more established PC VR customer base? That is a great question. That is a really great question. We're going to have to find out. I think it's the latter, because as we often point out, why would they need to dethrone Quest 3 when every Quest 3 owner can download Steam Link for free and connect to Steam VR in 5 seconds? Every PC gamer who has Steam Link on their headset, or even virtual desktop or Quest Link if they're connecting to Steam VR eventually, Valve gets the 30% cut of the games. I don't think this is about. I think they're going to do what they did before with Index, is push the high end. I think they're going to say, there's a lot of problems with today's experience of wireless PC VR. Let's do a headset and hardware and system that makes it amazing. Let's make it amazing. Let's be the headset that you get if your goal is, I'm not saying they won't do standalone, but I'm saying that if you're going to say, you know what, I don't care about having access to Batman Arkham Shadow and Asgard's Wrath 2 and Deadpool VR. I want the best PC VR wireless experience possible. I think that's going to be Valve's hope for Steam Freedom. I think they're going to be targeting the person who doesn't want to play standalone, who wants to play PC VR. That doesn't mean they won't do some standalone component. I'm sure they will. There's lots of evidence in the data mining they will. I just don't think it makes sense for Valve to make that their primary focus. Okay. Thanks so much, everyone, for all of your comments today and all of your thoughts. This has been a really interesting discussion. Again, we just want to come back to this idea that, the popular perception that VR is cooling off is nonsense. It is nonsense. We're just talking about today how we expect these 3 massive headsets, M4 or M5 Apple Vision Pro, Galaxy XR with Android XR, and Steam Freedom with SteamOS to launch in the next few months, according to these reports and rumors. That is massive. These are massive headsets. They are at the high end. But even if you're sitting thinking, I don't care about things at this price, remember that the ideas and the technologies that these headsets implement will trickle down over time into more affordable hardware, and the competition here will spur each player, right? Meta spent a lot of time with no competition. Look at what even the release of Apple Vision Pro at $3,500 did to Meta's software design. Now let's see what happens to, Meta and Apple as Samsung and Google enter, and you have these 3 giant companies vying to outcompete each other. And then let's see what happens when Valve comes in and you have 4 companies that are, major respected companies pushing to make the best VR and experience for you possible. I think this is going to be a rising tide thing for sure. This is going to help you, regardless of which of these 4 platforms you choose, Vision OS, Horizon OS, Android XR, or Steam OS. This competition is going to drive each of these companies to be better and better. And it's going to be like, one day it's going to be like the situation with smartphones where you can't go wrong. They're all so competition pressured that you can get $100 Android phone today and it's beyond what you would ever think $100 Android phone would be. We're going to get there eventually. competition got us there for smartphones. And consoles. This happened too in the 1990s, for example. The consoles saw huge competition pressure, and yeah. So we're super excited for what's going to happen in the next few months, for how this is going to set up these companies, of how they improve and evolve their platforms in 2026. This is a very good time for this industry. Do not believe the people who lie to you and tell you that this are cooling off. They are lying to you. VR is bigger than it has ever been right now. There are more people using a VR headset today than ever in the past, and that is only going to continue. So thanks so much, everyone, for your discussion. We will see you next week, and we will see you in the future.